I'm Alvina, a 34-year-old stay-at-home mom. My family consists of my husband, Morris, our 2 daughters who are in elementary school, and we live with my in-laws on the same property, so we are a household of 6. Before I got married, I worked night shifts, but Morris suggested that I quit my job if it meant we could spend more time together, so I decided to stay at home instead. I spent my time raising our kids, and later worked part-time when things were more manageable. I wasn't sure about living with my in-laws at first. I didn't know them well, and I thought it might be stressful for a daughter-in-law to live with her in-laws. So, I was relieved when Morris promised me before we got married that we wouldn't have to live with his parents. However, after we got married, Morris brought it up again. He said he was worried about his parents and suggested we live on the same property, but not in the same house. I was surprised and protested, but Morris asked, "Do you dislike my parents that much? If our situations were reversed, would you want to live with your parents?" I couldn't argue with that, since my parents were still healthy and living with my brother. Even though I wasn't sure about it, Morris told me that his parents had already started building a house on our property, and we couldn't say no, so we ended up living together. But I made one condition: we wouldn't interfere in each other's lives. This is how our shared living situation began. My in-laws agreed to this, and we lived separate lives. I would join them for meals once or twice a week. The house they built on our property was nice, and I even thought it might be a good thing for us, since we could inherit it one day. However, I made a big mistake in thinking everything would be fine. Over time, my mother-in-law started breaking our agreement. At first, she would visit me once or twice a week for help with small things like carrying something because her back hurt, or preparing dinner because she wasn't feeling well. But soon, she began to expect more. She would ask, "Is breakfast ready?" Or "Why hasn't our part of the house been cleaned?" As if I was responsible for all the housework. Eventually, I ended up cooking all 3 meals and cleaning both houses. Morris didn't say anything about it. Only my father-in-law would apologize sometimes and offer me a snack, saying, "I know it's not much, but please have this." My mother-in-law didn't just interfere with housework. She also started to have strong opinions about how we raised our children. She would say things like, "Your girls should be taking these lessons," or "Why don't your daughters help with housework? What did you have 2 girls for?" Every time she said these things, my father-in-law would defend me, reminding her that we had agreed not to interfere in each other's lives. She would apologize, saying she felt weak and unwell, but after a while, the complaints would start again. When I tried to talk to Morris about it, he would tell me, "We're family. You need to be flexible when things get tough. It's your fault for not handling it better." I felt frustrated every day. Then, one day, my mother-in-law collapsed at home. We called an ambulance, but she passed away suddenly from a seizure. I felt a mix of sadness and relief, as the constant stress from her interference was finally over. Even though she had broken the agreement, my father-in-law had always been kind to me. I tried to take care of him, and he often thanked me, saying he was sorry for not sticking to the agreement and that he couldn't handle housework on his own. My daughters loved their gentle grandfather, and we had some peaceful days together. But a few months later, father-in-law collapsed too. He survived, but became bedridden and needed constant care. When we discussed his care, he said he didn't want to be a burden and mentioned going to a nursing home. But Morris stepped in and said, "Families should care for each other. Nursing homes are for when it's absolutely necessary. Alvina said she's okay with taking care of you." This completely surprised me. I did love my father-in-law and wanted to help him, but caring for him full-time at home was a big challenge. I had young kids to take care of and, clearly, Morris wouldn't help. I didn't want to say I couldn't do it in front of him, so I agreed. Caring for him turned out to be very hard. I had to help him with meals, bathroom visits, and bathing. He was a strong elderly man, and it was awkward sometimes because we were of the opposite sex. Each day, I had to prepare breakfast, help the kids with school, do housework, care for the kids after school, and then prepare dinner, all while caring for father-in-law. Every night, I would feel overwhelmed. Every day, I somehow managed to get through it all, but by the end of the day, I was completely exhausted and would collapse into bed. Morris, instead of helping with his father's care, started spending even less time at home. He claimed he had work, often saying he was working overnight, and would only come home 2 or 3 times a week. Because I never knew when he'd come back, I struggled to prepare dinner on time. When I was too tired to cook anything elaborate, I would make something simple, but Morris would get angry. He'd complain, "I'm working so hard, and this is all I get?" When I asked for help with housework or caring for his father, he would respond, "You're a full-time homemaker. Caring for my father is your job. This went on for 3 years, and it made me feel miserable every day. Over time, my daughters grew older and started helping around the house and with their grandfather. Chantal helped with cooking and cleaning, and Janie would gently wipe her grandfather's back, asking him if it felt good. I was really grateful to have such kind daughters. One day, Morris left his phone at home when he went to work. Despite knowing better, I couldn't resist the temptation to look through it. His password was his birthday, so I could easily unlock it. What I found shocked me. It turned out that Morris had been having an affair since I started taking care of his father, and they even had a child together. The messages on his phone showed that he was financially supporting his mistress, although he had given me money for living expenses, and said he was saving for our children's future. He hadn't saved anything. The messages got worse, with him saying things like, "My kids are old enough now, so they're not cute anymore," and, "Taking care of the old man is a pain, but at least I've got my idle wife to do it." Putting him in a care facility would cost money, but having my wife do it is free. Gotta use free labor, right? I was furious and couldn't stay calm. Normally, I would have kept quiet and waited for more evidence, but I couldn't hold it in. As soon as Morris got out of the bath, I shoved his phone in his face and demanded, "What is this about?" At first, he seemed surprised, but quickly regained his composure. Then he said something that shocked me even more. "You've lost your femininity since we had our kids. You don't wear makeup anymore. Your clothes are all about comfort now, and you fall asleep with your mouth open." Morris's cruel words kept hurting me. He told me, "Ever since you started caring for my father, you've lost even more of your femininity. You're not even a middle-aged woman anymore, you're like a middle-aged man." His words were painful, but he didn't stop there. He went on to say, "My girlfriend always wears makeup and takes care of herself, even after having a child. I don't plan on divorcing you, but my love is for her and our child. Once my father is gone and the kids are adults, I plan to kick you out and live with her." He continued to say things that made me feel worthless. While he showed some concern for the kids, it was clear he didn't care about me at all. I couldn't hold back my tears. I tried to dress up and put on makeup, but it was hard. I was handling childcare and housework all on my own, and I had to do everything quickly, even if it meant my hair was messy. I asked him, "If you wanted me to look beautiful, why didn't you help with the housework or caring for the kids and your father?" But Morris was unkind in his reply. "Look at other women. They stay beautiful while raising their kids. You're just not efficient. As a stay-at-home mom, you have no right to argue with me. I'm the one putting food on the table. If you have a complaint, you can divorce me." He added coldly, "For a woman your age, job opportunities are limited. Do you really think you can raise our 2 kids on alimony and compensation from me?" I felt crushed and couldn't respond. I wanted to think about the children, and I couldn't bring myself to divorce him. But Morris said, "You can't, can you? If you care about the kids, you'll take care of my father until the end. After that, you'll work as my housekeeper. Don't worry, when the kids grow up, they'll help you, so you'd better treat them well." Then, he went to his room with a satisfied smirk on his face. I was stunned and didn't know what to do. Eventually, I regained my composure and went to take care of my father-in-law. I tried to act like everything was fine, but it must have been clear something was wrong. He asked me, "Is something wrong?" I tried to brush it off, but I couldn't hold back my tears and ended up telling him everything. After listening to me, father-in-law said, "Alvina, I have something for you. Can you come back in a few hours?" I did as he asked, and when I returned, he gave me a piece of paper with someone's contact information on it. He said, "Contact this person. They know everything. I should be the one to act, but with my condition." And he smiled. A few days later, Morris told me, "I'll be on a business trip for a week. I guess it's better for you too if we call it a business trip, right? I'll enjoy the sightseeing." I decided to take action while Morris was away on his week-long business trip. A week later, when he came home, he was furious and panicked. Everything was gone. I calmly asked him, "How was your week-long affair trip? Did you enjoy it?" Morris shouted, demanding to know what was going on. I explained to him that the contact my father-in-law had given me was for a man named Mr. Corey, an old friend of his who was a large landowner. Mr. Corey had always wanted the land where my in-laws' house stood and had been trying to buy it for a long time. My father-in-law had always refused, saying he planned to leave it to his son, Morris, but after seeing how Morris was acting, my father-in-law decided it was best to sell. Before Morris left, I had already spoken to Mr. Corey and we arranged to sell the house and land for a price much higher than the market rate. My father-in-law even asked Mr. Corey to demolish the house during the week Morris was gone. When Morris returned, all he found was an empty lot. We planned to build a new house using the money from the land sale. When Morris heard this, he tried to convince me to rely on him, saying, "You're jobless, right? Even if your father builds a house, you can't expect to live comfortably without my income." But I told him, "Don't worry about me. I got a job offer from a company run by an acquaintance." Then I turned the tables and asked, "Morris, shouldn't you be worrying about yourself instead?" When he asked what I meant, I explained that his job was only secure because his father was friends with the company president. But now that my father-in-law had cut ties with him, I told him, "The president said you could be fired because of your poor work and your affair." Morris tried to excuse himself, saying, "I didn't mean it. I was just angry. I wasn't really going to leave you. We're family. Let's work things out." But I firmly told him, "My family now is my daughters and my father-in-law. Goodbye." Then I hung up on him. Morris called several times after that, but I ignored him. Later, my divorce from Morris was finalized. I claimed compensation from both Morris and his mistress, as I had plenty of evidence of his affair. Through various sources, including the president of his company, I found out that Morris had been embezzling company funds to support his double life. Morris not only lost his job but was also being sued for damages. He tried to move in with his mistress, but she dumped him when she realized he had no money left. Now, Morris is struggling to find a new job while working multiple part-time jobs to pay off his debts and child support. As for me, I plan to live with my daughters and my father-in-law in a rented house until we can move into the new house my father-in-law is building for us. When my father-in-law offered to build the house, he said he wanted to move into a care facility, and that he wanted us to live happily there. I told him, "What are you talking about, Dad? We're family. It would make the girls sad. Let's live together." My daughters also took his hand and said, "We want to live with Grandpa." My father-in-law, with tears in his eyes, thanked us. Although it's tough to work and take care of him, my daughters help out. So, we are now living together as a family of 4 with the help of home assistants and day services. We're looking forward to moving into our new home as a family.
My husband gave me divorce papers. His part was already filled out. "If there's anything you don't like, feel free to give this out, okay?" He smiled, a smile that seemed to say he couldn't possibly be wrong. Years later, I never would have imagined that the man I married, Tatum, after an office romance, would one day make me want to slap that smile off his face. I'm Sally, a working wife married for 3 years now. We don't have kids yet. Our marriage isn't great, but it's not terrible either. My husband isn't exactly controlling, but lately he's been lazy and doesn't contribute much. It's not unusual for both spouses to share chores, but my husband refuses to help out. He still insists that housework is women's work. Maybe it's because he lived with his parents for so long, but I think it's mostly because of his influence from his family, especially his mother. When you marry someone, the type of mother-in-law you end up with can really shape your married life. It's like a luck game, and whether you get lucky or not with your mother-in-law can make a big difference. My luck? Well, it's like getting the same disappointing prize every time. "Sally, can't you make a decent meal?" Another miss? "Today my meeting ran late, and I got home late, so when I manage to leave on time, I do cook properly." What are you talking about? For a woman, taking care of the house is more important than work. It's common sense to have dinner ready when your husband gets home. I wish that kind of common sense had stayed in the 90s. Every day after work, my mother-in-law is somehow always there. My husband gave her a spare key without consulting me, so now she comes over every day. She's always there before I arrive, but I'm too afraid to ask how early she starts settling in. Then she spends her time finding faults around the house and bombards me with criticism and snide remarks as soon as I get home. Honestly, if Tatum keeps eating like this, it's going to ruin his health. That's why I cook when I can. Sigh, my poor son, stuck with such a disappointing wife. It's frustrating. She just brushes off everything I say, like she's not even listening, and calling him my poor boy is just weird. If it happened occasionally, it might be bearable, but her coming over every single day like this is incredibly stressful. What's worse is how my husband just laughs it off and doesn't intervene. And if she's going to come over every day, the least she could do is pitch in with something. But no, she's quick to criticize and make sarcastic remarks, that she never lifts a finger to help. Sometimes she even takes portions of the dinner I've prepared. I'm so tired. Well, I'll just take this takeaway then. Hold on, if you take that, we won't have anything for dinner. That's why I keep telling you to come home earlier and cook, but today, I couldn't. Stop making excuses. Just hurry up and cook for my dear son. I'm taking this. Oh, and I'll grab the strawberries from the fridge too. Bye now. Wait, you can't just take our dinner without asking. Even after our dinner was taken, my husband didn't say a word. I'm really getting annoyed, giving him an angry look, but he just keeps grinning foolishly. It's so frustrating. Why aren't you saying anything when our dinner was taken? It's no big deal, just a little bit. It's not just a little. They took the whole thing. Then hurry up. Huh? I'm really hungry. Hurry up and make dinner, will you? I was left speechless with anger and disbelief as my husband went to the living room and flopped down on the sofa. Ugh, this is so infuriating. At least pay for the takeout. I was seething with anger, screaming in my mind. I'm fed up with my mother-in-law showing up unannounced every day, but on the rare day she doesn't come, I feel uneasy. Why is that? When I got home from work, my mother-in-law was unusually absent. My husband, who should have been home before me, was also missing. Even though it should have been peaceful, I felt a sense of unease. The reason became clear the moment I opened the fridge. It was gone. The steak I had saved for a special occasion, bought on payday, was missing from the freezer where I had stored it. There was only one possible explanation. I hurried out of the house, jumped on my bike, and pedaled as fast as I could while still being cautious. My destination was my in-laws' house, just a 7-minute bike ride away. Finally arriving there, breathless from covering the distance in 5 minutes, I wasted no time. I pushed open the unlocked front door of their house and called out, but got no response. Yet I sensed someone inside. Knowing my mother-in-law often enters our home unannounced, I went in without hesitation. What I saw inside was shocking. There it was, my steak, the package emptied and the remains lying on the table. Seeing it almost completely eaten, I couldn't help but scream. My in-laws and, strangely, my husband looked at me in surprise. Sally, what are you doing here? Why did you barge in like this, Sally? Ignoring their questions, I grabbed the tray that had held the steak and glared at them. This is the steak I bought, right? Did you eat it without asking? Oh, that? It was delicious, thank you. My mother-in-law smiled cheerfully at me, while my face burned with anger. It's not about whether it was delicious. I bought that to share with my husband. Why did you eat it without asking? It's no big deal. Tatum had some too, but I didn't get to eat any. Hemph, serves you right for planning to eat it alone. Consider it a lesson for not buying enough for all of us. Learn from this. Why am I the one who has to learn a lesson? I looked at my husband, hoping for support, but he just grinned foolishly again. And you? Why didn't you stop them? Well, I did get to have some, so it's okay if I didn't get more. There's no need to get so upset. We can just buy more. That's not the point. It's useless. Nothing I say seems to get through to my husband. Just then, tears started welling up in my eyes, and I felt a gentle hand on my shoulder. I looked up to see it was my father-in-law, always calm and quiet. I never understood what he was thinking, but I couldn't believe he joined in eating it. Or maybe he didn't know I had bought it. That's what I thought. Anyway. Sally, next time, get a bigger piece of meat so we can all enjoy it properly, my mother-in-law commented casually. That's not the issue here at all. Do they have no sense of apology? Their selfish actions drained me so much that I couldn't even find the energy to respond. I'm leaving. Don't you dare come barging in here again. My mother-in-law's voice rang out as I turned to leave. My husband stayed behind, mindlessly drinking beer. At that moment, I felt utterly indifferent. A few days later, I realized I needed to have a serious talk with my husband. The conversation took a surprising turn. What? I blurted out involuntarily. While I was out working, I unexpectedly saw my husband. Seeing him wasn't unusual. He's in sales after all. However, it was strange because he had told me he was on a business trip in another state. Why? What's going on? To make matters worse, he was walking arm in arm with a woman I didn't know. Judging by his foolish grin, it was clear they had more than just a casual relationship. I instinctively hid and listened as they approached, overhearing their conversation. Tatum, why are you looking at me like that? She asked. Because you're so cute, he replied in a pathetic, lovesick tone. Their conversation continued. Do you really want to marry me? She questioned. Yes, I want to marry you as soon as possible, he assured her. Then will you get a divorce? Of course, I'll talk to her about it tonight. Decision made, he affirmed. It was confirmed. He was cheating. In that moment, I felt no shock at all. Instead, I realized I had fallen completely out of love with him. There was no love left for him in my heart. It was all gone. I'm done, I thought, feeling indifferent. I knew what I had to do. First, I needed to find a moving company. After discovering my husband's affair, I promptly moved out. 3 months later, I was busy moving once again. The movers delivered my belongings, but I had to unpack everything myself. The full-service option was too costly. As I opened the first box, the doorbell rang. As expected, there they were, my husband and the two of them. Without a word, I unlocked the door and let them in. They rang the bell again upon reaching my door, so I silently opened it. Immediately they entered. "Hey Sally, long time no see," my husband greeted me. "Wow, this place is really nice," remarked my father-in-law. "Sally, what were you thinking, running away and buying a condo without telling us?" my mother-in-law exclaimed. Yes, I had finally fulfilled my dream of buying a condo. The apartment I shared with my husband was old and worn out, and I had always hoped to move somewhere better. When I found a newly built condo that matched my dreams, I didn't hesitate to make the purchase. So when I informed my husband, he showed up uninvited with my in-laws in tow. It was exactly what I had anticipated. The three of them barged in without hesitation, but I quickly stood in front of them to block their path. "Stop right there. Only residents are allowed beyond this point." "What? Sally, what's gotten into you?" "That's harsh. They're my parents." My husband looked shocked. "Sorry, Tatum, but your parents are strangers to me." "Sally, how can you say that? Isn't family more important than anything?" "Other things matter more than that." "What a bad wife. Tatum, you should leave her." "Relax, Mom. But yeah, divorce might be an option. I'll ask for this condo as part of it. It's kind of small though, isn't it?" Ignoring me, my husband and his family looked around the inside of the condo near the entrance. "It would have been better if you got a two-family house, Sally. You really don't think about others." "Exactly. She's completely thoughtless, don't you think?" "Yeah, I wanted my own room too, but that's tough with this place, isn't it?" They kept talking, not noticing my disapproving look. "Well, if we divorce, we can figure something out, right?" Just as my mother-in-law reached for the doorknob leading to the living room, I gently pushed her hand away. It didn't hurt, but she looked at me shocked. "Sally, how could you push my hand away like that? What's gotten into you?" "I'm just asking you to respect our privacy and not enter without permission. You're still strangers to me," I calmly explained, unafraid of her anger. My mother-in-law stared at me, wide-eyed. "That's it. I've had enough. Fine, if that's how you feel, then we'll really become strangers. Tatum, divorce her immediately." My husband smirked oddly at his mother's sudden outburst, but I quickly spoke before he could respond. "Don't worry, there's no need for that," I assured them. My husband looked bewildered. "I don't know what you're misunderstanding, but I'm already single." "What? How could you do that without telling me?" my husband exclaimed in surprise. My mother-in-law joined in. "Did you really do that? You can't just do whatever you want." "Yeah, that's right. Filing for divorce without my consent is invalid. I'll take this to mediation," my father-in-law added, supporting my mother-in-law, but I had expected this. "Oh, but Tatum was the one who prepared the divorce papers." "Huh? What are you talking about? I have no idea." "Oh, so you didn't prepare it? Remember when we first got married, you said, if there's something you don't like, feel free to bring it up without hesitation." "Oh, yeah, now that you mention it." "And that's when you finally remembered, right?" my husband yelled, looking distressed. "I never thought I'd actually need it, but I'm glad I kept it since there was something I didn't like." "Why did you handle it yourself? Who does that seriously? It's not valid. Mediation, no divorce." "Well, fine. Let's settle this thoroughly before we talk about divorce, okay?" It seemed like everything had been anticipated. I pulled out documents and photos from a large envelope I had placed by the entrance. Inside were photos of my husband with his mistress and evidence of his affair. "What's this? Evidence of your affair?" my husband stammered. "Diddly well, you were the one who left home, so—" "No, the affair started long before that. I've heard a lot from this woman, your mistress, and I even have these photos." "Huh? Is that true?" After leaving home, I quickly consulted with a lawyer and hired a detective. They discovered that my husband and his mistress were meeting almost daily, making it relatively easy to gather evidence of their affair. With my lawyer beside me, I confronted the mistress. "Tatum told me he's divorcing you and marrying me. I'm so happy he's finally leaving you. That dreamy girl gave me lots of photos of the good times she spent with you." "No, that's not true." I expected a fierce battle with the mistress, but surprisingly, the conversation went smoothly due to her naivety. "Tatum will take care of my compensation and handle the paperwork, so make sure it's done." "Did you wait? I didn't agree to any of this." "Well, I did ask her to wait quietly until the divorce is finalized. No wonder she kept avoiding me whenever I tried to contact her." "I understand. The story has taken a new direction, and your explanation won't excuse your actions anymore. You're admitting you reached out to her first. That speaks volumes." Wait, listen. It's not what you think. It's not what it seems. There's no point in arguing. You have the right to contest the divorce papers, but the divorce will happen eventually. I'll also be seeking compensation and a fair division of assets. That's how it stands. Caught off guard by these unexpected developments, my husband collapsed to the floor, or rather my ex-husband now. Considering how useless he's been as a husband, I don't expect much in terms of savings, compensation, or property division. But honestly, I'm not counting on any of that anyway. My main goal is to divorce him and break away from both him and my in-laws. That's all I hope to achieve. I have a job and income, so I'll manage. I still have savings after buying the condo. I'm not worried about my future. If I can just stand up for myself against my husband, that's enough for me. With these thoughts in mind, I looked down at my stunned husband. However, it was my mother-in-law who couldn't hold back. "Wait a minute, Sally. What are you talking about? Your son cheated without our knowledge, didn't he?" "Well, even though our son cheated, it must have been your fault too, right? It's the wife's fault for getting cheated on." "Oh, is that so? Well then, could you please leave now?" This is exactly what I expected. I didn't think we'd have a reasonable conversation anyway. No matter what she says, she's just a stranger now, completely unknown to me. I decisively began to usher her out, but my mother-in-law resisted strongly against my efforts. "Even if you're getting divorced, you need to hand over this condo for the property division." "Why should I do that? We bought this with marital funds, right? Our son has a share too." "They probably don't understand the whole situation," my mother-in-law said with a smug look. "Well, if we had bought this condo with savings from our marriage, then that would be true. But unfortunately for her, that's not the case. I purchased this condo with money I had before we got married, so it's not marital property to divide." "Really?" "Yes, that's right. Both my parents passed away shortly after I started working. That's why I had planned to care for my in-laws after marriage. But facing my mother-in-law's constant attacks and snide remarks, every day shattered that resolve completely. Tatum never contributed financially to the household. Looking back now, was he spending it on his affair? Well, it doesn't matter. I've been covering almost all our living expenses, so there are no savings from our marriage. But compensation is different. Even if it's paid in installments, please ensure your son pays it promptly." "I can't believe this, Sally-san. Can't you reconsider the divorce? I'll talk sternly to my son about it." "Why should I? There's no benefit for me in that. But I promise to stop criticizing from now on." "Well, it's too late for that now. But how about this? Let's have steak tonight. We'll treat ourselves to some high-quality meat. Do you have money for that?" Well, do you have it? If you lend it to me, I'll go buy it." "No way. There's no benefit for me." With a deep sigh, I calmly addressed the three pale-faced individuals. "Please leave." "Wait a moment. Let's talk." "Please leave. Just buy the meat and go," I shouted with determination, and in that instant, they all jumped up and hurriedly left. Ah, that's a relief. Afterward, my ex-husband accepted the divorce without further resistance. Mentioning a lump sum compensation payment if he didn't agree seemed to make him realize the seriousness of the situation. His mistress was furious upon learning he wouldn't cover her share of the compensation. Well, my ex-husband felt comfortable because I was covering our living expenses, but his salary wasn't high to begin with. In fact, it was even lower than mine. Someone like him couldn't afford to pay compensation, even to his mistress. Even so, since she signed the documents, I'll make sure to collect the compensation I'm owed firmly and promptly. I was worried my ex-MIL might return, knowing the condo's location, but thankfully that concern was unnecessary. It seems she aged rapidly and lost energy due to the shock. My son, struggling on a pension, came back home in tears because he couldn't afford rent either. Surrounded by two unreliable men, my ex-FIL and ex-husband, and struggling in a tough financial situation, it seems my ex-MIL doesn't have the energy to come to my house. I heard this from my ex-husband, who pleaded with me to wait for the compensation payment. Now that I've started fresh as a single person, I'm enjoying carefree days of independence at home. There's no one making snide remarks, and no one eating my groceries without permission. I'm really enjoying living alone. Maybe I'll try some local specialties next time. Freedom is truly nice, I whispered to myself. "Oh, it feels so good. Freedom," I exclaimed. It feels great. Should I open another beer?"
When I married Jerry, I was fortunate to inherit some real estate from my grandparents. They advised me to use it wisely to secure our future, but also suggested I keep it confidential, even from Jerry. They believed it was prudent to maintain a passive income that only I controlled, ensuring I'd always have financial security. Unfortunately, Jerry has a habit of overstepping boundaries, particularly regarding possessions and finances. For instance, he once tried to redistribute gifts I had bought for my parents, giving them to his parents to enhance his image. His actions troubled me, especially when he reacted poorly to being confronted about them. Recently, a much more alarming incident occurred. I discovered $22,000 had been withdrawn from an account I managed, intended for our living expenses. This account was meant to complement the income Jerry contributed to our household, and I had no recollection of making such a large withdrawal. The only possible explanation was that Jerry had taken the money. When I confronted him, he nonchalantly admitted that he had lent the funds to his mother, Kayla, who was going through some difficulties. He did this without informing or consulting me. The revelation was shocking, not just because of the large sum involved, but also because it demonstrated a lack of communication and respect for our mutual financial decisions. This incident made me rethink the dynamics of our relationship. If our marriage isn't built on mutual respect and transparency, especially regarding finances, it may be time to reconsider our future together. The assumption that one spouse's earnings automatically belong to the other without any discussion is not a sustainable way to manage a marriage. If this approach continues, we may need to face the possibility of separation. Although the money was originally mine, earned through hard work, and we still have some savings, the loss isn't financially catastrophic. If Kayla was truly facing difficulties, I understand the need to help. However, I would have appreciated a simple conversation beforehand. The account is ours after all. If Jerry had taken the money from a personal account he set up before our marriage, I wouldn't have been as upset. But withdrawing such a large sum from our shared account without discussion felt like a breach of trust. When I expressed my disappointment, Jerry seemed irritated and dismissed my concerns. He promised, albeit reluctantly, to inform me next time before making any major financial decisions. Then, he excused himself to the bathroom, leaving me feeling unsettled. It wasn't like the early days of our marriage when Jerry would genuinely listen and value my input. Is this what change in a marriage looks like? A few days later, I visited my in-laws to deliver a package that had mistakenly been sent to our address. My mother-in-law, Amy, greeted me warmly and invited me in for tea. Though I had planned just to drop off the package, I accepted. While there, I noticed several luxurious items around the house, expensive cosmetics, stylish clothing, and health products. Amy mentioned, almost casually, that these were all gifts from Jerry. The realization hit me hard. The missing $22,000 had been used not out of necessity, but for extravagant purchases. The idea that Jerry had lent money to his mother for emergencies suddenly seemed like a gross exaggeration. This misuse of funds made me question not only our financial partnership but also the respect and communication in our marriage. As I sat there quietly sipping my tea, the atmosphere shifted. My in-laws' smiles faded, and they began to look at me with a strange mix of fear and accusation. Amy's tone turned confrontational as she remarked, "My son is such a wonderful, generous boy, always buying gifts for me. But what about you? As his wife, are you taking good care of my wonderful son? There seems to be some trouble. I heard from Jerry that you've been giving him a hard time for using the money to help me." It became clear that Jerry had portrayed himself as a victim to his parents, a good son, simply helping his mother in need. This explained their fearful and defensive attitude toward me. The revelation drained the last bit of patience I had, not only with my in-laws but with Jerry as well. I never expected such a lack of support and understanding in my marriage, and the thought of divorce started to feel like a real possibility. I began envisioning a post-divorce future where I would move back into my parents' home. It was a 2-story house, over 32 years old, built before my brother was born. It had once comfortably housed our family of 5, but now it stood mostly empty, becoming impractical for my aging parents who struggled with mobility. Although the house had been modified with handrails, its spacious layout was more of a challenge than a comfort. A 1-story home would be far more suitable for their needs. With the financial security from my passive income, I realized I could rebuild their home into something more comfortable and accessible for them. This idea filled me with both resolve and relief, so I called my parents to discuss not only my decision to divorce but also my plan to renovate their house. Surprisingly, my parents weren't shocked by the news of the divorce. Their calm reaction solidified my decision. It seemed they understood my need for a fresh start. When I brought up the idea of reconstructing their home, I could hear genuine joy in their voices. "We're so glad you're thinking of rebuilding the house for us." "Thank you," they said. They reassured me that even if they couldn't live there for much longer, it wouldn't be an issue since I could eventually take over the house, which would be funded by my own income. "Well, I'll start planning it bit by bit," I replied, feeling encouraged by their support. Just take it easy and don't overdo it, they advised, their words instantly lifting my spirits as I began organizing the rebuild of my parents' home. It felt like the start of something new, a fresh chapter not only for them but for me as well. I had been waiting for a response from the construction company when Jerry suddenly confronted me, his anger palpable. "How dare you use our savings to build a house without telling me anything about it?" he accused, slamming his fist on the living room table. His voice grew louder, completely disregarding my feelings. "My parents will be living in the new house," I said firmly, trying to keep my composure. "That's impossible," Jerry roared, his face reddening. "That house was built for my parents to live in." He insisted that since he viewed the funds as our shared property, his parents had as much right to the house as mine. "Are you seriously planning to cram 5 people into that tiny one-story house? Just give me the house," he demanded, banging the table harder with every word. Fearing how much worse his reaction would be if he discovered the truth about the passive income I had kept secret, I realized it was time to reveal everything. "To tell you the truth, I have passive income," I confess, feeling the weight of my grandparents' trust. "It's from the real estate my grandparents gifted me, and I use that income to pay for the rebuild. Not a single penny came from our shared savings." The guilt of breaking my grandparents' promise to keep this secret gnawed at me, but I had no choice. As I spoke, Jerry's anger escalated. His face twisted in fury, his shoulders shaking, and his fists slammed the table even harder. "What kind of wife hides an income from her husband? You spend my money but protect your own with secrets," he shouted, his words cutting deep. His reaction clarified everything that had gone wrong in our marriage: lack of trust, respect, and any sense of partnership. The issues had been festering beneath the surface for too long, and now they were impossible to ignore. "I'll take the house as alimony," Jerry sneered, his arrogance shocking me. "Any house built while we're married is mine too. I'm the head of the family, and if you disobey me, I'll divorce you." I stared at him in disbelief. How had I spent so many years with a man who could so easily dismiss my feelings, my contributions? The passive income had been meant as a safeguard for our future. If his earnings fell short or if something happened that left me unable to work, it was meant to protect both of us, not drive a wedge between us. Now, I saw clearly that my grandparents had been right to advise me to keep it a secret. They must have seen something in Jerry long before I did. I had planned to share my passive income with Jerry when the time was right, but after everything, I no longer felt any desire to use that money on him. Frustrated, I stood up and left the house, needing space from the suffocating atmosphere. I spent the night at a business hotel to clear my head and think through my next steps. When I returned home the next morning, Jerry was waiting for me with a sly, unsettling smile. He smirked as he approached, holding a sheet of paper he'd been hiding behind his back, divorce papers already filled out. "You're lying about your passive income, aren't you?" he sneered. "You made that up to cover for stealing from our common savings." His baseless accusations were tiresome despite my honesty about the passive income I had from my grandparents. No matter how much I insisted on the truth, Jerry was stuck in his own narrative, refusing to believe me. "It's the truth. I have passive income," I said once more, but I could see he wasn't interested in listening. His inability to trust or respect me was the final straw. It became painfully clear that this marriage offered none of the support or partnership I needed. The path forward was now inevitable. With a smug grin, Jerry shoved the divorce papers into my hand and said, "You let me know when my parents can move into the house, right?" He patted me on the shoulder, as if this was all some joke, then walked out the door, humming as he mentioned he was off for a drink. In that moment, everything clicked. Jerry had been concealing his disdain for me throughout our marriage. He had never truly valued my feelings or respected my perspective. The realization stung, but it also brought clarity and freedom. I didn't hesitate. I packed my things right then and there, filled out the divorce papers, and left the house for good. I moved in with my parents temporarily, explaining the situation to them. We agreed I would stay with them until the new house was completed. The next day, I noticed my phone flooded with missed calls from Jerry. When he called again, I decided to answer, hoping it would be our final conversation. "How?" "Hey, all your stuff is gone," he said impatiently, sounding confused by my actions. "What's going on?" Why was he panicking? He had pushed for the divorce after all. "We're getting divorced, Jerry," I replied calmly. "It's normal that I wouldn't stay. I will be coming back, so feel free to use the empty space however you like." There was a pause on the other end. Maybe for the first time, Jerry realized that I had resources he couldn't control. Then suddenly his tone shifted. His voice became unusually sweet, a side of him I had never heard before. "Hey, would you let my parents live in the new house?" he asked, almost pleading. I hung up without a second thought. I finally moved on. "I don't care if I have to live with your parents. Please." Jerry's plea stunned me. "I already told you, it's a small one-story house," I reminded him, incredulous. "And it's meant as a surprise for my parents." His suggestion was absurd. Not only was he proposing to give away a house he hadn't contributed to, but he spoke as though it was his to offer. His reckless disregard for reality left me speechless. "You don't care about the savings, do you?" Jerry continued, oblivious to my growing frustration. "You have no idea how much I worried about the money I set aside for you as an allowance, and the funds I saved for our living expenses." This conversation only solidified my decision. Jerry's understanding of our finances and our relationship was completely skewed. Moving forward without him was no longer a choice, it was a necessity. I explained to him the efforts I had put into managing our finances, how I had struggled to make ends meet, but he brushed it off, dismissing the significance of my sacrifices. "That has nothing to do with what's happening here," he said coldly. "You're careless with money, leaving the hassle to other people. And now you're presenting yourself to your parents like you did everything on your own." I confronted him, pointing out how he always tried to take credit for my hard work. His sudden silence only intensified my frustration. It became clear he was trying to paint himself as the mastermind behind everything, wanting to gift the house I built for my parents to his own, capitalizing on my sincerity just to impress them. His behavior was shallow, deceptive, and utterly insulting. "In the end, you're just trying to take advantage of my goodwill and claim what isn't yours," I said firmly, my voice unwavering. "There is no justification for trampling on my feelings and intentions like this. I will not give you the house I built with all my heart for my parents just so you can show off." Jerry grew louder, perhaps out of desperation. "Husbands and wives are supposed to help each other. I'll tell them you built it, please. We're not a married couple anymore, are we?" I cut him off. "We're strangers now. I already filed for divorce, remember?" His face fell, realizing that the boundaries I had drawn were final. On the day Jerry handed me those divorce papers, he may have thought he was in control, but now he knew otherwise. I submitted the divorce papers to the city office immediately. Jerry had been the one pushing for it, but when faced with the reality of our separation, he seemed stunned. "You already filed? Why are you so surprised when you're the one who asked for the divorce?" I asked, incredulous. "Oh, I didn't think you'd actually leave me. Hey, let's start over. We can talk it out and be a good couple this time," he pleaded, as if unaware of the gravity of his actions. How could he say such a thing now? This was a man who had squandered our savings on his mother, threatened me with divorce, and ridiculed me to the bitter end. Reconciliation was out of the question. "No, thank you. Please give my regards to your parents," I said brightly before ending the call. The next day, my phone was flooded with voicemails and messages from Jerry, still demanding that we get back together. His persistence was baffling and completely unwelcome. His repeated attempts to reconcile only affirmed my decision to move on. Jerry claimed we could start over and that he loved me, but I sensed his real interest was in my property and fortune, not in our relationship. To sever ties completely, I blocked all contact from him and his parents. Meanwhile, the construction of the new house was finished and my parents and I moved in. We now live comfortably in the home I built, surrounded by peace and contentment. Sometime later, I ran into a mutual friend who also knew Jerry, and I shared the news of our divorce. My friend offered kind words and updated me on Jerry's situation. It turned out that Jerry had abruptly quit his job, claiming he no longer needed to work hard because he had acquired real estate. When his company couldn't reach him, they were left scrambling. The next day, Jerry tried to retract his resignation, but his bosses, frustrated by his sudden disappearance, demanded an explanation. Unable to admit that he had been banking on my income, Jerry lied about his circumstances. Eventually, the truth about our divorce came out, and his lies were exposed. His company refused to rehire him, realizing he had tried to manipulate the situation for his gain. Ironically, the man who once scoffed at my passive income, suggesting it was a lie, now found himself in a precarious position. He returned to live with his parents, who were understandably upset. He's now struggling to find a new job, his reputation marred by his dubious exit from his last employment. As for me, life has moved forward in a positive direction. I'm living with my parents in the house I built, working a job I love, and enjoying life. The passive income I had once saved for our future together will now be used to support the people who have always stood by me. This turn of events has brought me a renewed sense of peace, and it's clear that moving on was the best decision for my well-being. My name is Milan, and I'm 38 years old. I married my husband, Kenneth, who is 4 years older than me, 8 years ago. My life took a dramatic turn when my beloved father passed away due to illness, leaving me with a substantial inheritance. I used this fortune to purchase a new house, which I adore. The scent of fresh wood brings me comfort. I often think that my father would be pleased to see this new home. Our old house, where my father lived alone after my marriage and my mother's passing, was just a 15-minute walk from our apartment. Following my father's fall a few years ago, he passed away recently. With the inheritance, I decided to demolish the old family home and build a new one. I've always believed that even though the old house is gone, the happy memories will remain in our hearts. Kenneth often echoed my father's words about building a new home as a way to start afresh. At first, I thought Kenneth was just trying to cheer me up, but it soon became clear that this wasn't the case. Kenneth, I need you to fill out the divorce papers and submit them to the appropriate place. Divorce papers? What do you mean? I asked, bewildered. Yes, exactly that. We're getting divorced. I want you to submit the divorce papers. This is not a joke. I never intended to live with you in this house. This new home, built with your father's inheritance, is meant for my mistress. She and I will be living here together. His words were astonishing. Mistress, you've been cheating on me. Yes, if I had met her before I met you, I wouldn't have married you. She's different, cute, kind, and genuinely loves me. We've been together for about 6 months. She approached me knowing I was married, but she didn't mind. She's happy just being with me and says the sweetest things. I should never have married someone as serious and uptight as you. Coming home to you was never enjoyable. He continued, I've decided to take this house as alimony. After 8 years of marriage without children, what benefit is there in staying married to you? I was overwhelmed and sought comfort from Kenneth, only to be met with unexpected blame. You're acting like a victim, but this is all your fault. If you had fulfilled your role, no one would stray. It's your responsibility that men are drawn to other women. You're to blame for the affair, the divorce, and losing the new house. It's wrong to play the victim or to resent me for this, he asserted. He claimed his infidelity was my fault and then handed me an envelope. What's this? I asked, puzzled. It's your alimony. I don't want any hassle later, so I'm giving it to you now. Be thankful. Inside the envelope was $1,000. As he took the new house, built with my father's inheritance, to live with his mistress, he tossed me the money. I calmly returned the envelope. Fine, I accept the divorce. If you don't love me, there's no point in staying married. I don't need the money. He seemed taken aback by how easily I accepted the divorce. Well, if you say so. Just don't ask for it back later. Kenneth packed his things and left a few days later, taking the keys to the new house with him. However, shortly after, my now ex-husband frantically called me, clearly agitated. What did you do? The police came to the house, talking about warrants and charges of trespassing. What's going on? According to him, the police had arrived while he was with his mistress at the new house. Hello, we're the police. You understand why we're here, right? The police? What for? Well, this is your ex-wife's house. Entering with a stolen key is illegal, both theft and trespassing. You understand? Kenneth, shocked and bewildered, looked at his mistress, who was equally confused. What's going on? Isn't this your house? You said you wanted to show me. Be quiet and stay out of this. Sorry to interrupt your domestic dispute, but we have a warrant. Could we discuss this at the station? Caught between the police and his mistress, Kenneth called me in a panic. Why is this happening all of a sudden? What did you do? I haven't done much. I simply reported that my house keys were stolen and that strangers were in my home. It's only natural to call the police. I promptly filed the divorce papers, reverted to my maiden name, Milline Baker, and reported the situation to the police. This is my house. Didn't you agree to give it to us as alimony? Kenneth argued. I never agreed to that, I countered. It's convenient for you to twist things to fit your narrative. Are you joking? How can you think that house is yours? I'm the one on the house contract. I paid for it with my inheritance from my father. Plus, I own the land. But your father said it was for us, Kenneth protested. That was when you were my husband. Now we're divorced and strangers. Why would you think it's your land? My father had transferred the land rights to me when he fell ill to prevent any complications if something happened to him. He must have anticipated a situation like this. Maybe that's why he advised demolishing the old house and building a new one. Money can be taken easily, but a house, now that's different. Kenneth's calm demeanor suddenly made sense. So you were planning this all along? I did nothing. You misunderstood everything and left. It was almost amusing watching you walk away, clueless. Too bad you were about to be happy with your mistress. Stop being ridiculous. You blamed me for the affair, the divorce, and losing the house. How does it feel now, stuck between your girlfriend and the police? Kenneth could only groan in response. Hating me is misplaced. This situation is entirely your fault. Ever heard of you reap what you sow? This is what you deserve. As soon as I said this, Kenneth exploded in rage on the phone, shouting accusations. Then suddenly, his voice faded. Excuse me, are you Mr. Smith's ex-wife? He's causing a disturbance at your house. Could we have a word, please? It seemed a police officer had taken over the call. I explained the situation to the officer, who sympathetically acknowledged how tough it must have been. Later, Kenneth and his mistress were taken to the station. Kenneth continued to insist that the house was given to him by his ex-wife and that it wasn't trespassing. His mistress, genuinely surprised, stated that she had no knowledge of trespassing. Kenneth claimed he had evidence to support his case and presented it at the station. Ultimately, the mistress's statement was deemed credible, and she was released with a warning. Kenneth, however, was found guilty of theft and trespassing and was fined. The issue now was that Kenneth had named me as his guarantor upon his release, likely because he didn't want his strict parents to know. The officer, clearly exasperated, informed me of the situation. Why should I be his guarantor? We're divorced and strangers now, I replied firmly. I have no connection with Mr. Smith anymore, so I refuse. You say he has no one else to turn to, but his parents live nearby. Please contact them. The officer relayed this to Kenneth, who was evidently frustrated. His parents were already aware of our divorce due to his infidelity, but they were unaware of his attempt to take the new house. The police call had informed them of the entire situation. Reluctantly, I visited Kenneth's parents' house after they requested more details. I knocked on the door and apologized. I'm sorry I couldn't explain the situation earlier. No need to apologize, his mother replied. It's all my foolish son's fault. But did you know about this? No, about what? I asked. Well, my son is here with his mistress, a much younger woman. We let them in to talk, but I'm not sure what he's thinking. To my surprise, Kenneth had brought his mistress into the living room. The scene was as described: Kenneth, the young woman, and my stern-looking father-in-law, Tom. Tom, it's been a while. I'm sorry for the delay, I said. Milline, thanks for coming. I apologize for calling you after the divorce, but I've heard Kenneth's side of the story. However, I can't fully trust someone who's been arrested for trespassing. Can you tell me your side? I recounted everything as requested. Throughout my explanation, Kenneth and his mistress kept their heads bowed, avoiding eye contact. What were you thinking, trying to take Milline's new house? Are you insane? Kenneth's father demanded. It's not that simple, Kenneth interjected. We resolved this between us. Resolved? How is that possible? Tom retorted. Your story is completely different from hers. Apparently, Kenneth spun his own version before I arrived. What were you told? I asked. Kenneth's father said he claimed you willingly transferred the house to him, then changed your story and reported him, leading to his wrongful arrest. Really? He said that. I was incredulous. It's true that when we discussed the house, I didn't object. But that doesn't mean I agreed to transfer ownership. To suddenly claim the house as yours and report it, it's beyond comprehension. "I'm so sorry, Meline, for having such a son," Kenneth's mother said. "What are you saying, Mom?" "I'm telling the truth." Meline wasn't agreeing. She was too stunned to speak. "How could you misunderstand and still claim to be her husband?" I nodded in agreement with Tom. Despite everything, Kenneth continued to make excuses. "Anyway, you never mentioned owning the land. If I'd known, I wouldn't have done this. If I had told you, you'd have found another excuse to do the same thing," I replied. "How can you say that? Were you spending a lot on her?" Kenneth asked, gesturing towards his mistress. "No, why would you think that?" I responded. "Right after our divorce, I happened to run into one of your colleagues. When I mentioned the divorce, I received some shocking information that left me reeling." "Figures," Kenneth's colleague said, looking uncomfortable. "No offense, but I thought it might happen." "What do you mean? Didn't he tell you?" I asked. The colleague shifted uncomfortably before spilling everything. "I should have mentioned this sooner, but I wasn't in a position to tell you. Kenneth has been bragging about his mistress, a woman 20 years younger. He was showing off, buying her expensive bags and jewelry. He said he didn't know how to contact you to inform you. He's been very open about his plans." The colleague continued. "Kenneth even mentioned a decisive conversation he had. He said he was planning to divorce you to marry his mistress. Apparently, her father passed away, and they're building a new house with the inheritance. Kenneth planned to claim the house in the divorce. He said, 'Once the house is built, I'll divorce Meline and somehow claim it. No matter the opposition, I'll get it, and then my young new wife and I will live in the big house.'" Kenneth had been showering his mistress with gifts for some time, it seemed. The house built with my father's inheritance was intended as a grand gesture to propose to her. "I've heard everything. Do you still insist you did nothing wrong?" I asked, sweating with frustration. Kenneth stammered, "Well, yes, I bought her gifts. So what? I used my own money and gave Meline her living expenses. She's not my destined partner. This woman is. I brought her here today to announce our marriage." "Are you out of your mind?" his parents exclaimed in shock. The most surprising response came from the mistress. "Marry you? Did I ever say that? We're not even dating." "What do you mean?" Kenneth asked, bewildered. "Exactly that," she replied. "I'm not in a relationship with him. I only approached him for a sugar daddy arrangement. I told you from the start that I was looking for someone for that kind of arrangement, and even married men were acceptable. You agreed to it initially, but now? What are you talking about?" "That's creepy," the mistress said. Kenneth went pale at this revelation, unable to speak. I asked, "So why did you come here with him today?" The mistress explained, "I came to ask for more time to pay the alimony. I knew he was married, so it's an affair, and I'm prepared to pay the alimony. But I'm still a student." "A student? How old are you?" Tom, Kenneth's father, interjected, looking bewildered. "I'm 22. I lost my parents early and have been doing sugar dating to pay for college. I sold all the gifts for living expenses, so I don't have savings. I can show you my bank account. I've just secured a job and can start paying alimony from my salary." "So, you came here to ask me to wait for the alimony?" I asked. "Yes, that's right," she confirmed. Kenneth, who had been listening in silence, erupted in anger. "Didn't you hear her? Unfortunately, she never intended to marry or even date you. But that's separate from the alimony you owe. And what about saying you wanted a house?" The mistress responded, "I meant I'd want a house someday when I marry. It wasn't about marrying you." "What?" Kenneth exclaimed. "I was suddenly taken to that house, thinking it was yours. Then the police came, and I learned it was actually your wife's." She bowed deeply to me, indicating that all of this was due to Kenneth's misunderstandings. Kenneth stood dazed, clearly in shock. "All right," I said. "If you promise to pay the alimony properly, I'll wait for the payment. But promise me no more sugar dating. It might not end simply next time." "I promise I'll never do it again," she said earnestly. I turned to Kenneth. "Expect a claim for alimony from me without delay." "Alimony? What are you talking about?" Kenneth asked, taken aback and not expecting to pay alimony himself. "You said you didn't need alimony when you returned the money," I reminded him. "I gave you $1,000 and now you're asking for more? That's not what we agreed on," Kenneth protested. "I don't recall any agreement," I said. "You returned the $1,000 I gave you saying you didn't need it. What I meant was that I didn't need such a trivial amount for alimony. Do you have any idea how much alimony for infidelity is?" It's $11,000, I replied, and you're also at fault for not having children in the 8 years we were married. At that moment, a loud slap echoed through the room. Someone asked, "What are you doing, Kenneth?" He held his cheek, clearly stunned by the impact. I asked, "Are you serious? Do you really think her inability to have children is her fault?" "Enough with your jokes, Dad," Kenneth's father interrupted. "Don't tell me you're blaming Maline for your affair too." "Well, that's how it is," Kenneth said. "I should have never married her. It's like fraud." "How could you think that?" I challenged. "Your parents wanted grandchildren. If she couldn't get pregnant, they thought it was better to split up. That's why I chose her." "If you truly believe that," Kenneth's father said, "then we must have raised you wrong. It took your mother 10 years to conceive you. She was heartbroken hearing about others having children quickly and went through intense treatments until you were born. Did you think pregnancy is solely the woman's responsibility? Is that why you could cheat so easily? If you really cared about her, you wouldn't have done what you did." "This isn't Maline's fault," Kenneth's father continued. "It's all due to your thoughts and actions." I was learning this for the first time too. Kenneth's mother, Jane, had struggled for 10 years to have him. Tears streamed down her face as she silently listened. "Carly," Tom said, "leave this house now." "Why?" Kenneth asked, bewildered. "You're a long-awaited son." "I can't bear to look at you now," Tom said. "Don't come back until you truly understand your mistakes." "Where should I go?" Kenneth asked. "Back to our apartment." "That apartment has already been canceled," I said. "With the new house, there was no need to keep it. I canceled it right after reporting to the police. There's no place for you to return." Kenneth was shocked to realize he had nowhere to go. In frustration, he started blaming his mistress. "It's your fault. All the money I spent, and now you say you never intended to marry me. It's fraud." She remained calm and replied, "I was clear about it being a sugar relationship from the start. I never asked for money or gifts. If you want to sue me, go ahead, but I have proof of our arrangement. And don't forget the alimony," I said. Kenneth seemed flustered. "Wait, please wait. I contacted his parents with her and then left their house. Later, I hired a lawyer and sent a demand letter for the alimony. I didn't send it to his parents' house, knowing he no longer lived there." "Why is it being sent here?" Kenneth's workplace receptionist asked as she looked at the letter. "It's possible to send such documents to both residential and employment addresses," I explained. "This is regarding the alimony." "Is that what this is about?" she asked, noticing Kenneth's pale face. "You look so shaken. Didn't you inform him?" "I did," I confirmed. "I just told the truth. No one asked me to keep quiet. It's his own doing." The arrival of the demand letter at Kenneth's workplace spread news about his actions, including his sugar dating and the subsequent loss of everything. Overcome with embarrassment, Kenneth couldn't handle the gossip and resigned, claiming he was leaving on his own terms. His troubles didn't end there. He sought free legal advice, claiming he was a victim of marriage fraud. The response was discouraging. "We see cases like this, but with the evidence you provided, it's not considered fraud. You agreed that it was a sugar relationship from the start," the advisor said. "If you developed feelings later, that was one-sided. We won't stop you from suing, but it's likely a waste of money." Kenneth decided not to pursue the lawsuit based on this advice. Eventually, he came to me, defeated. "I don't know what I was thinking. I overlooked how important you were even after 8 years together. I promise this time, I'll make you happy and won't be distracted by anyone else," he pleaded. Naturally, his plea over the phone didn't sway me. My response was resolute. "I refuse." "Why?" "After all this begging, I realized over these 8 years that you are a terrible person. You try to blame everything on me and take what's mine, then shamelessly come back after losing it all. What benefit would there be for me to reunite with someone so selfish?" Kenneth protested. "You don't have to put it that way. You once said the same things to me. Anyway, never contact me again," I said firmly, "though given your situation, I doubt you can." I hung up, deleted all his contact information, and changed my phone number. However, a few days later, something unexpected happened. "Your ex-husband came to the house the other day," one of the neighbors said. "We had to chase him away after he caused a commotion." "What was he thinking?" I asked, astonished. The neighborhood ladies who were aware of the situation pretended to call the police to drive him away. Since then, I haven't seen him. I don't know where he is or what he's doing, but I'm confident he isn't leading a happy life. "I've been demoted at work," he announced somberly upon arriving home. "What?" I nearly spilled my tea in shock. His company's recent poor performance and impending restructuring had hinted at potential personnel changes, but I never anticipated it hitting Scott directly. Nevertheless, I felt it was crucial to stand by him during such trying times as his wife. "Well, perhaps it's just a stroke of bad luck. Times are tough, and I'm also working, so let's not fret," I replied, trying to maintain a cheerful demeanor. "I'm Catherine, 50 years old, currently employed full-time in the back office. I reside with my husband Scott, who is 2 years my senior, our high school sophomore daughter Julia, and my 72-year-old mother-in-law Ethel. While Ethel and I may not always see eye to eye, our interactions are limited to when I'm home since I work outside, so I've chosen not to dwell on it. To my daughter, I advise, your dad is feeling a bit down because of the demotion, but let's try to carry on as usual around him." However, Scott began to unload his frustrations, and as the saying goes, people often vent their frustrations on those closest to them, those they trust the most. And unfortunately, I became the recipient of it all. The following day, while cleaning the hallway on my day off, he passed by and suddenly remarked, "You've put on weight since we got married, haven't you?" "Huh? Well, I am 50 after all. Even the gynecology pamphlets mention that women tend to gain weight around menopause. But according to my company's health checkup, I'm not overweight," I retorted. Then came his heartless words, "Forget the health checkup. Your figure is too unsightly. You're just being lazy. If you're overweight, I'm embarrassed to be seen with you and your barrel-like figure." His sudden cruelty left me speechless, and as he added, "ugly," before retreating to his room and locking the door, I was left bewildered. What? What's happening all of a sudden? I pinched my own side in disbelief. I can pinch it. When I squeeze it between my thumb and forefinger, it fits snugly, and I can tell that I've gained more than enough. But why now all of a sudden? It felt like an arrow had pierced me unexpectedly, the shock so intense that I even forgot I was holding the magician wiper in my hand, which then slipped and clattered loudly to the hallway floor. From that day onward, Scott's treatment of me grew increasingly harsh. To exacerbate matters, my mother-in-law seemed to have overheard the argument from that weekend and decided to intervene. Then tensions escalated further. As I ascended the stairs with a basket of laundry intending to hang the clothes, my mother-in-law awaited me not at the bottom, but at the top of the stairs. She would make remarks like, "Oh, how dreadful. If only you weren't so overweight, we could pass each other on the stairs. I wouldn't have to wait here because your obesity restricts the space for both of us." Moreover, during dinner when I served fried chicken, she'd comment, "Isn't this what's contributing to your weight gain?" and promptly remove my plate. Instead, she'd suggest that only the three of us who weren't overweight should eat. My gynecologist had mentioned that after middle age, one tends to either gain weight or lose it, yet my mother-in-law remained on the thin side. She was as slim as a dried-up tree, but I managed to tolerate her incessant taunts. Such annoyances had become routine, so I had grown somewhat accustomed to them. What truly wounded me, however, was my husband's behavior. Since that incident, Scott ceased speaking to me. There were no expressions of gratitude or compliments, not even when I served him breakfast. He simply ate in silence and then left the table. He would enter and exit the bathroom without uttering a word. Though we still shared the bedroom, he would merely turn his back to me and immerse himself in his smartphone. I couldn't bear being treated as though I were invisible. One night, summoning my courage in the bedroom, I asked, "Is there a reason you're ignoring me?" His response was cold. "Not really, but I prefer not to engage with anyone other than humans." He continued, "I don't want to be associated with a family member who is this overweight. If you truly care about me, you'll shed some pounds." What? His words left me disheartened. But it's inevitable with age, you understand that, don't you? Even though I walk 1.2 miles for my commute, I'm doing my best in my own way. Despite my efforts to combat the weight gain that often comes with aging, he coldly turned his back, dismissing my struggles. "If you're not seeing results, then it's as if you're not trying at all. Don't speak to me anymore." And with that, he truly stopped acknowledging my presence. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law persisted in taunting me about my weight. Whenever meat, fruits, or rice were served, she'd question, "Are you permitted to eat that? Do you realize?" Eventually, I found myself restricted to salads and boiled vegetables. Scott remained silent throughout, merely moving his chopsticks without a word. It seemed my marriage was nearing its end. During my spare moments, I began packing my belongings. If this was the treatment I would receive from Scott, perhaps it was best to disappear altogether. When I confided in my daughter, saying I'm considering moving back to my parents' house, she sympathized. I understand. I witnessed Grandma and Dad always picking on you during meals. It's painful to watch. I'll come with you, Mom. We can stay with your parents and I can still attend high school from there. And now, tomorrow marks the beginning of the demotion I've been anticipating, right after the winter break. Scott approached with a smile, suggesting, let's all have a drink, just this once. Tomorrow, life without subordinates begins for him. I pondered whether he found this situation unbearable. However, by now, I had lost the will to play along. Even his forced smile grated on my nerves. Scott piped up, let's enjoy a nightcap with dinner. I'll whip up some wine spritzers. It might have been the first time he had directly addressed me since the demotion announcement. He continued, Julia can have juice, and I'll fix you a wine spritzer too, Catherine. He then placed the prepared drinks at 3 spots on the table. Odd, why the sudden change? As Scott momentarily turned his back to search for the TV remote, I discreetly sniffed the drink he had poured. What? I detected a faint scent, unmistakably familiar. I knew it from my own culinary endeavors. How could he even think to serve me this? I refused to tolerate it any longer. Between my mother-in-law's constant harassment and my husband's neglect, I had reached my limit. The sight of the wine spritzer pushed me over the edge. Scott, could you please grab the camembert cheese from the fridge? It's from the local dairy farm, and it's absolutely delicious. I'm grateful for this family time. Would you mind fetching it? I requested, hoping he would contribute at least this much to our moment of togetherness. As Scott made his way to the fridge, I took the opportunity to swap my drink with the one on the seat to my right. It was Ethel's seat. Upon his return with the cheese, I announced, now that we have our snacks ready, I'll go fetch Julia and mother-in-law, loud enough for them to hear. Dinner's served. The two of them joined us in the dining room and took their seats, creating an appearance of a typical family dinner. Except, I didn't have any meatloaf or cornbread salad. Instead, we had stewed chicken soup, camembert cheese, and wine spritzers. Julia opted for juice. Let's dig in, Julia broke the silence, while Scott and my mother-in-law remained silent. I took a sip of the wine spritzer Scott had prepared, noticing him watching me closely. With a smile, I remarked, yeah, it's quite good. Huh? Scott muttered something under his breath, but I chose to ignore him. Instead, I focused on my salad before taking another sip of the wine spritzer. Suddenly, a stream of red liquid shot out from my mother-in-law's mouth, resembling Godzilla's fiery breath. Wait, Grandma, what happened? My daughter exclaimed, rising from her seat in surprise. Some of the liquid splattered onto her salad. Did you choke? Are you okay? Julia quickly fetched a towel and returned, offering it to my mother-in-law, who wiped her mouth. However, her reaction was one of disbelief. What? What is this? Grandma, your mouth, it looks like spicy cod roe, my daughter observed, growing increasingly concerned. Hey you! He put it in my drink, my mother-in-law shrieked, attempting to grab me, but I coldly brushed her hand away. It wasn't me, Scott made it, I stated firmly. This dismissal, coupled with the revelation of Scott's involvement, seemed to stun her. What? My mother-in-law screamed, her lips still stained with sauce, before turning to glare at Scott, who was visibly trembling. Leaning towards him, I exerted some pressure by resting my hand on the table. You thought you could sneak it into the wine spritzer, didn't you? I could detect it slightly because I've encountered it before. That was a dash of hell, wasn't it? I confronted him sternly. A drop of hell? I picked it up at the food fair in Alabama. It might not be as renowned as death sauce, but with its subtle lime undertones, I found it more appealing for its homely flavor, I explained. That hint of lime was what I detected, indicating he had added a significant amount to the drink. My mother-in-law likely didn't notice due to the wine spritzer's aroma, or perhaps she mistook the lime scent for part of the drink's flavor. Regardless, this was an exceptionally malicious prank, incredibly vicious. Wait, Dad did that? Julia's expression was one of disbelief. I actually intended for Catherine to have it, Scott admitted. You should switch it with yours. Even if my mother-in-law is foaming at the mouth, it's out of line. Just because she realized it was meant for me, she wants to pass it off to me. I'm not touching that dangerous concoction, I asserted in a hushed tone, maintaining pressure on Scott. And then I confronted him. Explain why on earth he thought pulling such a stunt was acceptable, I recounted. You were putting on weight, and spicy food can boost metabolism. So I figured I'd give it a try, Scott reasoned. Pathetic. What a lame excuse, I scoffed. Did he truly believe such an explanation would suffice? It was utterly embarrassing. Under pressure, my husband hesitated, shifting his chair back slightly. I'm not crazy. This is a legitimate reason to support your diet. Here, swap your cup with mine and have a taste. I made it for you, he urged. Closing in, I saw him retreat. What are you implying? As the one who prepared it, you should be the one to sample it. Come on. Rising from my seat, I grabbed the cup containing the fiery concoction meant for my mother-in-law and tossed it in front of my husband. Setting it aside, I closed the gap once more. After ignoring me and treating me like I'm invisible for so long, did you honestly expect me to drink something you claim to make with a smile out of the blue? Did that not occur to you in your empty head? Isn't it all too childish? Come on, taste it as the one who brewed it. Take some responsibility, I asserted, slamming the table. At the sound, my husband, perhaps hoping to evade further confrontation, rose from his chair and stepped back. Amidst the tense silence, a soft voice broke through. Both my husband and I turned to the source. It was our daughter, Julia. She began to speak, her words sounding strained as if she were forcing them out. Taking out your frustration on Mom, who supports you the most when work gets tough, and subjecting her to repeated cruel treatment. It's like a childish prank. I might not be supposed to say this to my parents, but it's too immature and unbearable to witness. Our daughter stood up, addressing her father directly. Is it wrong to struggle with weight? Mom wakes up early, walks to work, and even packs her own lunch. So it's not fair to say she's not making an effort, she continued, turning to face her grandmother. And you going along with it, taking away Mom's dinner like the fried chicken incident. What Grandma is doing is reminiscent of high school drama. It's embarrassing, she remarked firmly. At these words, a flustered Ethel began to offer a confused excuse. That's not it. I'm just concerned about Julia's mom not gaining any more weight. I want her to feel positively about herself in front of her granddaughter. Besides, Ethel, like Julia, is also struggling with weight. But Julia remained resolute. Compassion is about understanding and supporting the other person. It pained me to see Mom's dinner taken away, especially when she looked so upset. That's not compassion. Mom hasn't had any health issues in her checkups, yet taking away her food is just plain mean. Ethel fell silent, and it appeared Julia was finished addressing her for the time being. She turned her attention back to her father. Mom goes to the gynecologist regularly and stays active, yet Dad just brushes her aside because she's gained a bit of weight. What's up with that? His indifference creates such tension in the house. Can't you see it? Even Colonel Sanders and Aunt Stella from the cookie ads are on the plump side. Ever heard of happy weight? If Mom becomes a lovely grandmother like Aunt Stella as she gets older, I'd be overjoyed. When I have kids and she's a grandma, wouldn't it be wonderful to say, Mom, you've reached some happy weight, and share a laugh? That's my dream. Please don't ruin it for me, she stated matter-of-factly, her gaze icy. Despite their blunt delivery, her words warmed my heart like hot milk with cookies. It was pitiful to witness a father admonished by his own daughter. And one more thing, she addressed her father directly. If you're going to disregard someone because of weight gain from aging, remember, with your receding hairline, you could easily be overlooked yourself. The tension in the room was palpable. Her sharp words left a chill in the air, making the living room feel as cold as ice. It seemed she had said all she needed to. Afterward, she turned to me. That's enough, Mom. It's time to let it go. It'll be better for you. Her words caught me off guard. Let it go? Yes, I should let it go. As I mentioned earlier, my dream is to see you holding my child, saying you've gained some happy weight and sharing a laugh. For my sake, I want you to be happy because that's part of my dream. So please, let it go. Be happy and fulfill my dream. Her words filled my heart with warmth. Each word she spoke brought me such joy that I no longer cared about being ignored by my husband, the fat shaming from my mother-in-law, or the drink incident. Warm tears streamed down my cheeks. Yes, you're right, I agreed, my vision blurred with tears. Come on, Mom, she patted my back gently, urging me forward. Oh, okay, I mumbled as I fetched a document I had been concealing for some time. What? My husband exclaimed, startled. After enduring a month of being ignored, I reached a decision. I have my bags packed. Let's go our separate ways, I declared, presenting the divorce papers with only my name written on them. I just wanted you to lose some weight. If you had slimmed down as I asked, I would have been satisfied. It wasn't until Julia pointed it out that I realized it was venting. But since you didn't shed any pounds, I thought I'd torment you further. I didn't mean for it to. I didn't expect this outcome, my husband confessed, panic creeping into his voice. Those who fail to notice until things escalated are the ones acting incredibly immature, Julia retorted sharply. Living without her beloved granddaughter is no laughing matter for my mother-in-law. Ethel interjected softly, her voice as gentle as stroking a cat. Julia, dear, you wouldn't want to keep living with us, your grandmothers. Julia shut down Ethel's plea with a firm refusal. I decline. I no longer wish to share the same space as people who behave like middle schoolers. Wait, okay, hold on. I understand. I'll taste it, as you suggest. I'll take responsibility as the one who prepared it, Scott conceded, picking up the glass before him and downing its contents in one gulp. Scott, much like Ethel earlier, ejects a stream of the red liquid from his mouth, leaving him with a set of lobster-like lips. There, see. I took responsibility, didn't I, Julia? Scott proudly declares. Julia captures a picture of them both with their lobster lips on her phone and remarks, "You both are so ridiculous. Mom, let's go," before swiftly exiting the living room. Yeah, I'll follow her lead, I agree. Left behind is a dinner table splattered here and there with the wine cocktail mixed with a drop of hell, along with a husband and mother-in-law sporting red lobster lips. I returned to my parents' house with Julia. Upon explaining the situation at home, both my mother and father are enraged and decide to confront Scott and Ethel. They return with the divorce papers, and I ultimately end up getting divorced. My ex-husband Scott's career hits rock bottom, with no notable achievements in his remaining years. It turns out he had a habit of ignoring issues he disliked, even with his subordinates, which ultimately led to his demotion, a revelation I only recently discovered. Meanwhile, my ex-mother-in-law Ethel, who had been difficult and seldom ventured outside, finds herself in a stalemate within their two-person household. Eventually, I received a call saying, "Things wouldn't be so dull if you and Julia were here." This sentiment is underscored by the 17 years that passed since Julia was born and we lived together. Please come back, I'll stop ignoring you. But I won't be returning. Enjoy indulging while you can. Once you have grandchildren, you'll have more physical work to do, my mother jokes with a smile. That's a good point. Today, like every day, I'm walking to work. Along the way, my boss drives by and stops the car, offering, "Need a ride?" "No, thank you, I'm sticking to my diet." "Just get in, Catherine," he insists. "I found a new boyfriend," I announce proudly. Both of us have experienced divorce, which has strengthened our bond and mutual understanding. Dieting is great and all, but being late would pose a problem, he mentions as he drives. "I've never been late before," I retort, puffing up my cheeks defensively. He glances at me and gently pokes my puffed-up cheek with his finger. "Give me the time you saved by riding in the car today for our conversation," he says with a playful smile, ever the chatty boyfriend. I'm Ellie, and this is where my journey begins. I grew up in a small town, moving from one foster home to another until I finally found a place with the Thompsons. They gave me the priceless gift of stability, something I had longed for all my life. Life was pretty plain until I headed to college, becoming the first in my foster family to venture into the big city. I immersed myself in studying languages, with Japanese being my focus. After working tirelessly, I landed a job as a translator at an international trading company, a huge achievement for a small-town girl like me. One ordinary Tuesday, I walked into a cozy cafe near my office and ordered my usual black coffee. That's when I saw him, Jack, tall and with a smile that could light up a room. He was on his phone, looking all business yet somehow relaxed. When our eyes met, I felt an undeniable connection. "Hey, I've never seen you here before," I said, trying to sound casual as I settled into my seat with my coffee. He looked up, his smile widening. "Just trying to escape that office chaos. I'm Jack," he said, extending his hand. I shook it and felt a spark. "I'm Ellie. So what brings Mr. Escape the office to my favorite spot?" I asked, intrigued. "Good coffee and better company, it seems," he quipped, and from that moment, we hit it off. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and before we knew it, a year had passed. Our conversations had evolved beyond coffee chats. Jack was a city guy, charming and worldly, but we both knew life wasn't always smooth sailing. After a year of dating, we decided to get married, and I was over the moon. I wanted him to meet the Thompsons, the people who shaped me into who I am. My foster parents, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, were salt-of-the-earth types who lived simply and worked hard. They had been fixing up their house, so they rented a tiny apartment that was nothing special but filled with warmth and love. "It may not be much, but it's filled with good memories," I told Jack. He nodded, but I caught the look in his eyes as he scanned the cramped space. He was clearly uncomfortable. We spent the weekend there, and my folks treated him like royalty, but Jack was distant, always checking his watch, eager to return to the city. As we drove home that Sunday night, the silence in the car felt heavy. "Jack, you been quiet. What's up?" I finally asked. He sighed, clearly reluctant to speak. "Look, Ellie, your folks are nice, but we come from different worlds," he said, his words steaming. I fought to keep my composure. "What does that mean?" "It's just different. I'm not used to this simple life," he admitted, trying to smooth things over quickly. I turned to look out the window, biting my lip as I considered the differences between our lives. "Jack, I don't need fancy things, but we have to respect where we both come from," I said firmly. He nodded. "Right. Of course, I love you, Ellie. That's what matters," he said, but a part of me wondered if we truly understood each other. That night, I lay awake, reflecting on the simple life I cherished and the complicated world I was stepping into. Just days after our awkward visit to my childhood home, it was my turn to meet Jack's side of the family, his mother, Vivian. High-rise apartment in the city center was decked out in lavish decor that screamed wealth. When we arrived, she greeted us at the door, dressed in designer clothes from head to toe, and her apartment looked like something out of a magazine. "Ellie, isn't it? And what is it you do?" Vivian asked, sizing me up as if I were a product she was considering. "I'm a translator. I work with Japanese clients at a trading company," I replied, trying to sound confident. "Oh, impressive," she said with a half smile, but her eyes were scanning me for flaws. When I mentioned my background and my foster parents, her expression shifted. "From the province and fostered, you say? That doesn't seem quite fitting for my Jack." Jack jumped in quickly. "Mom, please. Ellie's wonderful and I love her. We're getting married." "Married? When's this happening? How are you planning it?" Vivian's tone changed to one that felt a bit too invasive. "We're thinking of something small and intimate, just us in Hawaii," I said, hoping to highlight the romance. Her eyes nearly bulged. "Hawaii? Just the two of you?" "No, that won't do. What will my friends think if I can't even throw my only son a proper wedding?" I tried to stay calm. "It's our day, Vivian. We just want something that feels true to us, without all the fuss." That was the tipping point. She huffed and declared the discussion over, walking out of the room. Jack glanced at me, his expression apologetic, and whispered, "Let me talk to her. We'll sort this out." 4 months flew by, and despite the rocky start, there we were in Hawaii, ready to say, "I do." It was supposed to be an intimate ceremony, just Jack and me, but of course, Vivian had other plans. She showed up, camera in hand, eager to capture every moment. It felt like she was lurking, ensuring she had plenty to post online. Jack seemed oblivious, basking in the sun and the joy of the ceremony. I tried to smile through it, leaning in to whisper, "I thought it would be just us." He squeezed my hand, his eyes sincere. "I know, I'm sorry, she's just excited. Let's try to enjoy our day." But Vivian was buzzing around us, her phone always up, shouting, "Smile here. Oh, this will look fabulous on my feed." I felt like a prop in her social media showcase rather than a bride on her wedding day. What was meant to be our special moment had turned into just another one of Vivian's extravagant productions. Coming home as newlyweds should have been about cozy, love-filled days. Breakfast in bed, slow dances in the living room, the works. At least it started that way. Jack slipped a stunning ring on my finger the day we got back, one that caught the light and sparkled endlessly. "It's been in my family for generations," he said, his eyes shining with pride. "Be careful with that ring. It's more than just expensive, it's an heirloom." Vivian chimed in, hovering over us like a dark cloud on a sunny day. Her reminder felt more like a warning, making my heart sink a little. The first few weeks, Jack and I were in our blissful bubble, stealing kisses and cooking together. But then Vivian started dropping by unannounced, like a storm that had settled over our home. It all began one afternoon when I was folding laundry, and the doorbell rang. There she was, that familiar look on her face, as if she were about to inspect a military base. "Just checking in on my favorite newlyweds," she said, but her eyes darted around the apartment as if she were searching for something wrong. I tried to be polite, making small talk, even as she wandered into the kitchen, her fingers gliding over every surface. "Ellie, darling, do you ever clean? And where are the fresh vegetables? A man needs his greens." Her tone dripped with disapproval. Jack just shrugged it off later when I told him, "She means well, babe. Just try to go with it." Go with it. My frustration bubbled up. "Jack, she's treating me like I'm on trial in my own home." He kissed my forehead casually, as if that would solve everything. "She's lonely, Ellie. Let's cut her some slack." But that slack turned into something else entirely. It escalated until one day I came home late from work, riding high on the excitement of signing a major contract with a new client from Japan. That is, until I found Vivian in my living room, an uninvited storm brewing. "I heard you've been spending a lot of time at that office late nights." She raised an eyebrow, her voice thick with suspicion. "Yeah, it's a big project. Lots of new opportunities," I tried to explain, but she clearly had other ideas. 2 days later, she personally showed up at my office, counting the men working with me out loud and loudly suggesting I could be having an affair with one of them. Without invitation, she barged into my boss's office, eyeing him because he was elderly, and declared, "Well, she definitely won't mess with the old man." I was mortified, my face burning as red as a beetroot. I demanded she leave and apologized profusely to my boss and colleagues for the disruption. Thankfully, Mr. Jackson had a sense of humor and just laughed it off. But the damage was done. That night, I lay awake, wondering how we'd gotten here. I'd had enough. I cornered Jack in our bedroom, my voice low and tense. "Your mom crossed the line today, Jack. She's accusing me of cheating, and it has to stop." He sighed deeply, weariness etched on his face. "Please just try to get along for me." But getting along increasingly felt like just putting up with nonsense. Things between Jack and me were getting rocky, largely due to Vivian's constant whispers in his ear. Jack had begun to nitpick everything about me, my clothing choices, my work hours. He had never minded before, but suddenly everything was an issue. "Ellie, why do you have to wear that to work?" He frowned one morning as I got ready. I was simply wearing a blouse and skirt, nothing fancy. "It's professional, Jack. What's wrong with it?" I replied, adjusting my skirt. "It's too much. You're just inviting comments from all those guys." His tone had a sharp edge, and I realized this was about more than just my outfit. This became a regular occurrence, but it peaked on my birthday. My boss gave me a small gift, just a book with a note that read, "To my practically daughter." It was an innocent, kind gesture, but Jack blew it out of proportion. "You see? That's exactly what I'm talking about. Why is he giving you gifts?" "It's not right, Ellie." Jack was furious when he saw the book. "It's just a book. He's like a father figure to me." I tried to explain, but Jack's eyes were clouded with suspicion, all thanks to Vivian's meddling. The tension at home had become unbearable, so I was relieved to head out on a business trip to a neighboring city. Our company was setting up a new factory, and I looked forward to a break from the drama. The trip went smoothly, and I was wrapping up with dinner alongside our Japanese partners when I noticed shadows lurking near the restaurant. My heart raced as I walked toward my hotel. The dimly lit street made me uneasy, and the shadows crept closer. Panicked, I asked 2 colleagues to walk me back. As we neared the hotel entrance, the light from the lanterns revealed who was following me: Jack and Vivian. "What the hell, Jack? What are you doing here?" I blurted out, unable to hide my shock. Vivian stepped forward, her expression twisted in anger. "We're making sure you're not up to any trouble. We can't trust you around all these men," she spat. My colleagues stared in disbelief, and I felt my face burn with embarrassment. This is ridiculous. You're both acting like I'm some kind of criminal. But Vivian wasn't having it. I'll be telling your parents about this. They should know what kind of woman you've turned out to be. I couldn't hold back a bitter laugh. Go ahead, they'll laugh you out of town. The ride back was silent. Jack and his mother sat in the front, leaving me alone in the back seat, staring out the window as city lights blurred into streaks of color. Tears filled my eyes. I was married to the man I loved, yet I felt trapped in a nightmare, with Vivian as the relentless specter that wouldn't go away. When Vivian actually followed through on her threat and showed up at my parents' place, I was in disbelief. I couldn't believe it when Mom called, her voice trembling as she recounted the situation. She's here, Ellie, my mother said, tone strained. She demanded to see your father right away. So, I gave her the address to his workshop, my heart sinking as I realized how far this had gone. I felt my stomach drop as my mom spoke. Dad's at his workshop, where he spends most of his days crafting and creating. He's truly in his element, she continued, her voice steady but laced with tension. Your mother-in-law went there and saw your father in his work clothes, stained from the glass. She just scoffed. I gripped the phone tighter, bracing myself for what was coming next. When your father went over to greet her, he apologized for not shaking her hand. His hands were all stained from work, you know. She looked at his hands, Ellie, made a face, and said something awful about coming to this backwater for nothing. My heart sank further as I listened. She says she understands now why you turned out the way you did and just left without another word. Thanks for telling me, Mom. I need to think about what to do. I hung up, feeling a tumult of anger and hurt swirling inside me. It wasn't long before Vivian made her next move. The very next day, she cornered me in the living room, her eyes cold and judgmental. Ellie, now I see where you get your manners, or should I say, lack thereof. Your father is just an ordinary worker, his hands permanently dirtied. What kind of upbringing, what kind of manners could you possibly teach any children? I shuddered at her words. They struck me like daggers. But before I could respond, Jack walked in. Instead of defending me, he went straight to his mother, taking her in his arms. Mom, I'm sorry about all this. Ellie's family, they're just different from us. That was it. The last straw. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Different? Is that your way of saying my family isn't good enough for your high standards? My voice broke, but hurt too deep. Jack looked at me, his eyes empty. It's just how things are, Ellie. We come from different worlds. So that's it, huh? My voice rose, thick with emotion. If I'm such a disgrace, why don't we just end this? If I'm so beneath you, let's get a divorce. Vivian's eyes lit up, almost gleefully. Well, that sounds like a splendid idea. Jack just nodded passively. Maybe that's for the best. I spent the night in our guest room, tears streaming down my face as Vivian's every word replayed in my mind. Each dismissive glance from Jack, the life I thought we were building, it all felt like a lie. The early morning light filtered through the blinds, casting a soft glow across the room as I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand. It was time to make some difficult but necessary calls. First on my list was my boss, Mr. Jackson, whose kindness had always made the stresses of work bearable. Mr. Jackson, it's Ellie, I started, my voice shaky. I'm facing some personal issues and need to take some time off. I can take it unpaid if necessary. Ellie, he replied quickly, concern evident in his voice. You're one of our most valuable team members. Take a paid vacation, sort things out, and come back when you're ready. We'll manage here. His generosity brought a lump to my throat. Thank you. Mr. Jackson, I can't tell you how much this means to me. Next, I dialed my mother, who had always been my anchor in any storm. As soon as she answered, I spilled everything, my words tumbling out in a torrent of emotion. Mom, it's all falling apart here. I can't do this anymore with Jack and his mom. It's just too much. Her voice was calm and soothing. Ellie, we've been prepared for this call. Your father and I are on our way. Just pack what you need. As I ended the call, I glanced around the room, my eyes landing on the few personal items I brought into this house, none of which felt like they belonged. I started packing, each item a reminder of the life I thought I'd build with Jack. Vivian appeared at the doorway, her presence like a dark cloud. Remember, Ellie, only take what you bought with your own money. Don't think about grabbing anything else, she said, her voice cold and accusatory. It wasn't long before I heard the gravel crunch under the tires of an old vehicle. Looking out the window, I saw the familiar beat-up pickup truck that belonged to my parents. Jack and Vivian followed me outside, their expressions a mixture of smugness and curiosity. As my parents' truck pulled up, Jack scoffed loudly. "Sure that old thing will even make it back?" My father stepped out, a quiet strength emanating from him as he faced Jack without a word. He handed over the divorce papers, his eyes steady and unwavering. Jack grabbed the papers and signed them with a smirk, his mother chuckling beside him, glad to be rid of this mess. We arrived at my parents' home, a large, imposing structure that felt more like a sanctuary now. I spent the next few hours unpacking and trying to settle my nerves. The peace of the familiar surroundings slowly calmed me. That evening, as I sat looking out at the garden, my phone rang. It was Vivian. "Ellie, you need to return the ring. It's a family heirloom, not a parting gift." I held the phone away for a moment, taking a deep breath before responding. "Vivian, that ring was given to me as a wedding gift. If you want it, come and get it yourself." The morning light was just beginning to spill over the horizon. When I spotted Jack and his mother, Vivian, from the upstairs window, they stood at the gate, staring up at the house as if they had wandered into a fairy tale. Their expressions of disbelief were almost comical. A smirk crept across my lips as I watched them from behind the curtain. They looked so out of place against the backdrop of my large, meticulously landscaped front yard, their confusion palpable. I turned away from the window, hearing my parents downstairs, and joined them. We shared a knowing glance before stepping outside. Calm and collected, my parents walked past Jack and Vivian without a word, heading straight for the garage. They pretended not to notice the bewildered stares from my estranged husband and his mother. As the garage door swung open, revealing 3 sleek, high-end cars, I could hear Jack's sharp intake of breath. My father chose a gleaming black sedan, and we all climbed in. Just as we were about to pull out of the driveway, Jack finally found his voice. "Ellie, what is all this? This house? These cars?" I stepped out of the car, approaching them with a calm I hadn't felt in months. "This is my family home, Jack. My father owns a glass factory and several commercial properties. This is where I grew up." Vivian's face contorted in confusion. "But your father, he was wearing work clothes. His hands were dirty." I couldn't help but smile at her naivety. "Yes, Vivian, he was launching a new product line. It's a tradition in his company to get involved hands-on. It doesn't mean he's not successful or wealthy." They stood there, stunned, unable to reconcile the image of the hardworking man they'd seen with the opulence surrounding them. At that moment, a group of neighbors approached, their faces bright with smiles. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. We heard about your latest charity event. It's wonderful what you're doing, and you've got our support in the mayoral elections." One of them called out cheerfully. My parents nodded and thanked them, while Jack's face twisted with a mixture of awe and regret, his eyes darting between his mother and me. Vivian looked as though she had swallowed something bitter, her earlier arrogance washed away by the undeniable reality before her. I turned back to the car, giving Jack and Vivian one last look. "Well, I guess you see things a little differently now," I said, not unkindly. Their expressions of shock and realization confirmed that the past, with all its hardships and heart-hatches, was finally behind me. But before I could savor the moment, Jack made his move. He shoved his mother aside with such force that she stumbled. "It's all your fault, you know. You pushed her away with your nonsense," he shouted at her, bitterness lacing his words. Turning to me, his demeanor shifted completely. He rushed over, trying to pull me to an embrace, his hands reaching out as if he could erase everything with a simple touch. "Ellie, please listen to me. We were good together, weren't we? I love you. I really do," he pleaded, his voice a desperate whisper. I recoiled from his touch. The warmth we once shared had long been extinguished by his betrayal. "Stop, Jack. Just stop," I said firmly, pushing him away with all the strength I could muster. Quickly, I got into the car, my heart pounding. Without a word, my father pressed the remote control, and the garage doors began to close behind us. Jack and Vivian stood there, calling out, their voices a blend of desperation and disbelief. "Ellie, please forgive us. We didn't mean any of it," Jack yelled, his voice cracking. Vivian, scrambling for the dignity she'd lost, joined in. "Ellie, my dear, I was wrong. Please." As we drove away, the finality of the moment weighed heavily on me, but a part of me craved closure, a definitive end to this chapter of my life. When we reached the end of the driveway, I asked my father to stop the car. Thinking this was his chance, Jack ran up to us, his face lit with hope, while his mother trailed behind, her earlier elegance replaced by desperation. Without a word, I rolled down the window, pulled off my wedding ring, and held it out. Jack's eyes widened as he realized what was about to happen. "This is where it ends, Jack," I said, my voice steady. With that, I threw the ring out of the window. It glittered briefly in the morning sun before landing on the soft grass beside the road. Vivian, ever the opportunist, rushed to where the ring had fallen, her hand scrambling through the grass. I rolled up the window, shutting out their pleas and the painful past they represented. "Let's go, Dad," I said quietly. 2 weeks later, I was back in the city, settled into a new apartment that felt more like home than I had in a long time. I returned to work, where Mr. Jackson welcomed me with open arms and a gentle understanding that eased my transition back into routine. Jack made several attempts to contact me, each one more desperate than the last. He claimed to have cut ties with his mother, begging for another chance, but some things, once broken, can't be mended. I told him it was over for good this time and blocked his number. No more words were needed. I have no intention of taking care of Grandma. I don't even want to see her face. "Why don't you do it, Lily?" my sister-in-law said with a malicious grin. She probably thought that if she could take control of the house, she wouldn't have to worry about Grandma at all. My brother smirked beside her, glancing at me and Grandma. I could see it would be hard for Grandma to find peace in such an environment. "It's okay, Grandma. I'm here for you," I said confidently. "My name is Amy. I've just turned 50 and am now enjoying a slow-paced life with my husband. Our 2 children have grown up and are following their own paths. The days when I juggled work and family while they were little seem like distant, tender memories now. Today, my life revolves around my work with my husband and the time I spend with my grandmother. My husband, Terry, and I run a well-known traditional restaurant. I manage the business as the owner, while Terry, a skilled chef, supports the establishment with his culinary expertise. I chose this path because I studied business in college and was fascinated by restaurant management. Initially, I wanted to cook for our guests, but things didn't go as planned, and I quickly shifted focus. During college, I started a kitchen job at a luxury hotel near the university, but my cooking skills were lacking. A senior coworker told me I couldn't even peel vegetables properly, so I was reassigned to serving. Although it was a blow, it's now a funny memory we laugh about. Whenever I faced challenges, I turned to my grandmother. She would listen quietly until I finished, then look me in the eye and say, "Amy, I know your dreams and hopes, but life isn't always a straight path. There are detours and bends, and each of these experiences helps you grow. Go at your own pace and stay strong." Her words were a comforting balm. "Thank you, Grandma. No matter how small the step, I'll keep moving forward," I'd say, always buoyed by her gentle encouragement. Having lost my parents early on, she was my greatest comfort and cherished treasure. In the midst of all this, I met my husband, Terry. He was a chef at the hotel where I worked part-time, having mastered cooking over the years. Knowing about my passion for cooking, he approached me and said, "I'm still learning myself, but I'll teach you everything I know if you're interested." I was thrilled and eagerly accepted. From there, we started with the basics, cooking together at each other's homes. The hotel's kitchen was often occupied, so we practiced at home, creating our own private cooking class. As we cooked and stirred pots together, our relationship grew deeper. Before long, we were seriously dating, and after a few years, we got married. Even after marriage, Terry continued to pursue his passion at the hotel kitchen, while I joined a startup, overseeing several restaurants to understand the practical aspects of business management. The theories I learned in university and real-world experience were worlds apart. Despite the challenges, I gradually got the hang of managing a business. With the support of my company, we were given the opportunity to run the upscale traditional restaurant we had always dreamed of. I took on the role of manager, setting up the restaurant and inviting Terry to lead the kitchen. After completing his training, he was eager for a new challenge and happily accepted. Together, we nurtured and grew our restaurant. But my deep involvement in work meant I regrettably spent less time with my dear grandmother. Now, Grandma lives with my brother Colin. He's a serious office worker with a somewhat troublesome personality. When I excitedly told him about my new role as manager through a company program, his reaction was unexpectedly cold. Wait, are you seriously taking such a risk? Wouldn't it be more secure to remain a regular employee? Besides, managers hired like that don't earn much, do they? He asked with a skeptical look. Colin, isn't that a bit harsh? I tried to counter, but his stance was firm. Amy, listen closely. Stability is the most important thing. Why are you so intent on doing as you please? Not just you, but your husband too. Don't you realize how tough it is to run a business? What will you do if you fail? His words left me taken aback. Sure, running a business might be hard, but we had the support of the company. It wasn't entirely on us. Then, with a somewhat malicious grin, my brother's wife, Lily, chimed in. You two are quite daring, aren't you? But if things go south, don't come running to us for help. Her comment made me silently vow never to rely on them, no matter what. The reason my beloved grandmother ended up with such a mean sister-in-law began when my brother and his wife suddenly moved in. I discovered this during one of my visits. When I rang the doorbell, Lily answered, looking surprised. "Oh, Amy, what are you doing here?" she asked. I was taken aback and blurted out, "Lily, why are you at Grandma's?" Taking a deep breath, Lily smiled and said, "Well, I'll let you in on a secret. Recently, I've been taking care of Grandma here. I wanted to spend more quality time with her, so we decided to move in." She seemed quite proud of herself. Admittedly, with a new restaurant and everything else, I had been too absorbed to notice the change. I had been extremely busy lately, which left me with less time for Grandma. With Lily spending more time at home, she had probably been looking out for her. "Thank you, Lily. It's really a big help," I said, though a pang of sadness hit me at the thought of missing time with my grandmother. When I dropped by Grandma's house, Lily often greeted me with a hint of sarcasm. "Oh, Amy, you're here again. Think Grandma's quite busy, you know. But then, this is Grandma's house," she remarked. I would respond with a smile. "Sorry, I just wanted to chat with Grandma." Visiting Grandma's house every weekend was my joy. She always welcomed me with a warm smile, but lately, I had noticed she wasn't her usual energetic self. I tried to brush it off as my imagination, but one day my fears became a reality. When I knocked on Grandma's door and received no answer, I gently opened it to find her collapse at the entrance. In shock, I rushed to her side, shouting, "Grandma, are you okay?" I immediately called an ambulance and she was taken to the hospital. I accompanied her, and before I knew it, night had fallen. After some time, a doctor called me in to discuss her condition. He began with the ominous words, "She doesn't have much time left." I was devastated and struggled to process the news, but I understood that Grandma was gravely ill. It turned out that this was her regular hospital, and the doctor explained that her condition was beyond surgical intervention. It was best for her to rest at home. While absorbing this news, I received word that Grandma had regained consciousness. I hurried to her room, where she greeted me with a weak smile. "Amy, I'm sorry for surprising you," she said, her voice faint but warm. Through my tears, I asked, "Why didn't you tell me earlier, Grandma?" She replied softly, "I didn't want to worry anyone." At that moment, I felt the profound depth of Grandma's strength and kindness. I decided to cherish the time we had left and spend more quality moments with Grandma. "How about we tell everyone about your illness?" I gently suggested to her. She seemed a bit surprised by the idea but agreed. I hoped my brother and his wife would appreciate the chance to be with Grandma in her remaining days. A few days later, Grandma was discharged from the hospital. However, this didn't signify improvement. She was sent home because there were no more treatment options available. When we arrived at Grandma's house, my brother and Lily were lounging in the living room, their expressions relaxed. Lily, with a cheerful tone, remarked, "Where have you been? It's been so relaxing here while Grandma was away." My brother chuckled and nodded. It's been refreshing to have some peace and quiet without Grandma's voice around. I was taken aback by their comments. One look at Grandma, and it was clear how serious her condition was. Trying to keep my emotions in check, I said, "Stop with the jokes. Grandma's condition is very serious. They can't treat her at the hospital anymore." Both my brother and Lily looked stunned. My brother, clearly in disbelief, asked, "You're joking, right?" Lily seemed to dismiss my words with indifference. Taking a deep breath, I told them firmly, "It's true. If you don't believe me, you can ask Grandma's primary doctor directly. With a frail voice, Grandma added, "Actually, I don't have much time left. There's not much I can do from now on." Lily's eyes widened in surprise. "Wait, I didn't sign up to be a caregiver. I'm just living here to save on rent. I can't handle such a huge responsibility," she said, her voice tinged with annoyance. I was incredulous at her words. Grandma's eyes filled with deep sadness as she whispered to herself, "So I'm a burden now." It was clear that Lily and my brother were only concerned with their own comfort, disregarding Grandma's feelings. Holding Grandma's hand, I comforted her. "It's okay, Grandma. I'm here for you. This is your house, and we should prioritize your well-being," I told Lily firmly, but she remained stubborn, showing no sign of changing her mind. "I'm sorry, Amy," Lily finally said, though it was clear she wasn't truly remorseful. I was taken aback by their attitudes. Grandma, wiping away her tears, apologized, and I felt a deep urge to protect her. Lily's gaze was filled with annoyance, as if dealing with us was a burden. "Can you just leave? Honestly, I get distracted with you guys around. Don't come asking for help later because I won't be inclined to assist," she said, her tone sharp. "Seriously, just thinking about Grandma gives me a headache." "Don't try to shift the responsibility onto us," my brother added, glancing at Grandma with evident irritation. It was clear that the inconvenience was on their side. Yet, as soon as they learned about Grandma's condition, their only thought was to get rid of her. Their attitude filled me with a heavy sadness. "We won't be speaking to Lily or you anymore. Our family relationship ends here. If anything happens later, don't rely on us," Grandma said, her voice trembling and her eyes misty. "I won't come to this house anymore. Goodbye." "Great, even if Amy gets into trouble somewhere, we won't be involved," my brother smirked. "If Amy is in trouble, it's none of our concern. Do your best with Grandma," Lily said with a dismissive wave. With that, Grandma and I left the house. I decided to take her to my place in a taxi and start a new chapter together. As the taxi door opened, Grandma's eyes widened in surprise. "Oh, what a magnificent house," she exclaimed, clearly impressed. Indeed, our home was larger and more glamorous than where Grandma had been living. The company we work for is unique. In addition to our regular wages, we receive bonuses based on the restaurant's revenue. This generous system was designed to motivate employees, providing us with a stable and comfortable lifestyle. As I was lost in thought, the front door opened gently to reveal Terry with a warm smile. "Welcome back. I've been waiting," he greeted cheerfully. I had texted Terry about Grandma's arrival, and he had thoughtfully prepared tea for us. After such a long time, Grandma was delighted to see Terry again, her face lighting up with a warm smile. I led her into the living room and served her some of the comforting tea. As she sipped it, she looked visibly relieved and took a deep breath, saying, "This place feels like somewhere I can comfortably spend my remaining days. At the other house, I felt like I was just in the way." Her words carried a hint of sadness, and I could sense the coldness she had experienced from Lily and my brother. My shock grew when I learned that Lily had been taking Grandma's pension money without permission. Could Lily really do that? I muttered under my breath, and Terry, equally shocked, said, "I can't believe it. We can't let this go." I felt the same way. "We should give them a taste of their own medicine," Terry said passionately. I nodded in agreement. "Yes, let's take some action." A few days later, I received several calls from my brother. After waiting a while, I answered to find Lily's angry voice on the other end. "Hello? Why the constant calls?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "It's about Grandma's house. We got asked to leave suddenly." "This is your doing, isn't it?" Lily shot back. Trying to hide my amusement, I replied, "I have no idea what you're talking about." Her distress was evident as she said, "Wait, why would she do that suddenly? Did you and Terry plan this?" "No, we didn't do anything," I said calmly. "Grandma decided to sell the house because it was in her name all along. We were surprised too, but she simply wanted to move on. The sale has already been finalized and there's a new owner. Staying there longer might cause issues." Lily's voice was filled with a mix of shock and confusion. "Do you think Grandma really understands what's going on? Did you guys offer her some sort of sweet deal?" "No, we didn't do anything of the sort," I assured her. "Grandma just wanted a fresh start." Terry spoke with the real estate agency right away, and Grandma agreed to the sale because she didn't want to deal with you and Colin anymore. As I spoke, I felt a sense of satisfaction. Let's find a new path and build our lives separately, I added, ready to move forward and leave the past behind. I ignored Lily's frustration and tried to stay positive. Where are we supposed to live now? Our previous flat is gone. Lily's voice quivered with anger. From what I gathered from Grandma, Lily had a penchant for shopping, always flaunting the latest designer bags and frequenting beauty spas and salons nearly every week. My brother's income, on the other hand, wasn't particularly high, and with their old debts, their financial situation must be quite strained. Despite their challenges, my brother seemed infatuated with Lily's beauty and probably indulged her every whim, which is why they had moved into Grandma's house to save on expenses. To be honest, I wasn't overly concerned about their situation, so I playfully suggested, why not try staying in a motel for a while? Oh, but it might be tough if you're short on money. Lily paused, then replied in surprise, why are you talking about our financial situation? I didn't get any response from my brother at that moment. Later, Grandma took the phone and, smiling, said, actually, I told Amy everything. And by the way, Amy's house is really nice, spacious with the latest appliances and very comfortable. It's completely different from what you're used to. My brother seemed intrigued by Grandma's words. When he took the phone, he asked, why are you guys so rich? I thought you were struggling financially. It might surprise you, but aside from our regular salaries, we also receive a substantial bonus. Roughly speaking, we probably earn about twice what you make in a month. Both of us work hard and live comfortably, I said with a hint of pride. He was silent for a moment, clearly taken aback. Seriously? Yes, I confirmed. You always said full-time employment is the best, but maybe you should broaden your horizons. We seem to be managing quite well with our approach. I advised them coolly, you need to sort things out on your own without relying on us. Lily's sweet voice then surprised me with a request. Hey Amy, could we visit your place, just your brother and me, even if it's just for a short while? Taken aback by her proposal, I firmly replied, no, I've already told you that we're done. Figure things out on your own. They tried calling me several times afterward, but I had nothing to discuss and chose not to answer. I decided they were no longer part of my life. Soon after, I received unexpected news. My brother and Lily had been arrested for shoplifting from a small store. From the police, I learned about Lily's enormous debts, which far exceeded what my brother's salary could cover. She had even been siphoning money from Grandma's pension. Debt collectors had gone to my brother's workplace, which forced him to leave his job. Their financial situation deteriorated rapidly, and they were reduced to stealing donuts and sandwiches to eat. The police informed me that, during their arrest, both my brother and Lily had pleaded with them to reach out to me. My brother said, I know we've done wrong, but please help us. Lily tearfully begged, forget our past mistakes and help us just this once. Despite their pleas, I couldn't easily forgive them. Their reckless spending and neglect of Grandma had led to serious consequences. I believe they were now facing the outcomes of their own decisions. Months have passed since then, but my feelings remain unchanged. Grandma is still lively and enjoys each day, which brings me comfort. I've taken time off work to spend quality moments with her, and I'm grateful that my company is supportive during times like these. Though Grandma occasionally feels unwell, we find joy in our walks through the garden and in our conversations about the flowers. These moments are precious to me. Grandma, your birthday is coming up. Is there anything special you'd like to eat? I asked with a smile. She replied, I'd love a sandwich made by you. Although my cooking isn't exceptional, her kind request touched me deeply. I still have many places to show her, foods to taste together, and stories to share. I cherish every heartwarming moment with her and strive to make her smile as much as possible while she's feeling better. After my divorce from my husband was finalized, I moved in with my daughter, Natalie. About 6 months later, something unexpected happened. It was my day off, and I was relaxing at home with Natalie when I got a call from my mother. She told me that my ex-husband and his mother had shown up at my parents' house uninvited. I quickly got dressed and went over there. When I arrived, I found my ex-husband and his mother sitting on the sofa in the living room, waiting for me. I had no clue why they were there. Why are you here at my parents' house? I asked. My ex-husband, John, surprised me by saying, "I want you to return the money you owe me." My name is Aaron. I'm a 40-year-old office worker. I was married to John for 14 years, and our daughter, Natalie, was born around the time we got married. She's now in the 8th grade. We were a happy family, and I felt sure that we would always have a loving home together. I met John on a blind date and was instantly drawn to his friendly, kind, and cheerful nature. He liked me too, and we stayed in touch throughout high school. We shared our contact details and started dating. After a few dates, a year later, he proposed and we got married. I loved him deeply and was thrilled when he asked me to marry him. I had a close group of friends from high school, and we always came together for big events. When I told them I was getting married, they were all excited and congratulated me. They all came to our wedding and talked about wanting to get married too. Over time, one by one, all my friends from the group got married, and eventually, everyone in our circle was married. We laughed and joked about how our group of friends had all suddenly become adults, with everyone now being married. Then, when I got pregnant, my friends started getting pregnant too, and before long, we had turned into a group of moms. It felt like we were all going through life together, and I knew we would stay close friends forever. I was happy being both a wife and a mother. I also enjoyed my job. After college, I started working in the planning and development department of a big company, and my days were very busy. The job was challenging but very rewarding, and I learned something new every day. One of my mom friends, who stayed at home, once told me, "You're really a workaholic, Aaron, but you also have a great family life. It's like you have 2 lives or something." My friend says I'm a very strong woman, but I really wish I had the endless energy of a strong man. Both John and Natalie helped me unwind and relax at home after a long day at work. When I got home, I would say, "I'm home." Natalie would respond with a cheerful, "Oh, Mommy, welcome home." When she was younger, she would greet me with a big smile and a hug, which made all my tiredness disappear for the day. John would also help me relax. After Natalie was born, John quit his job and started working part-time so I could continue working at my company. He took a job at a cafe and took care of picking up and dropping off Natalie. When I came home, he always had dinner ready. After a long day at work, it's tough to cook, so coming home to a hot meal was a huge relief. John's cooking helped me feel relaxed and refreshed. I would take baths with Natalie and we chat about our day. My life was fulfilling both at work and at home. I could manage it all because John and Natalie were so supportive of my job. Their kindness made me even more dedicated and passionate about my work, and as I achieved good results, I got promoted. With the promotion, I started working more overtime and often came home quite late. By then, Natalie was older and understood the demands of my job, so she could handle some things on her own. John also began working more hours at the cafe. Lately, I've been enjoying exploring different coffee shops and buying their coffee beans. I picked up some today, along with cakes from a new bakery. I suggested we have them with coffee. John has really gotten into coffee. He's been learning about roasting beans and trying different types at his cafe job. That's why he makes such great coffee at home. John and Natalie were both very understanding about my dedication to work, but I didn't notice that our family was slowly starting to drift apart. I first realized something was wrong when Natalie came to me with a concern. "What's up? You wanted to talk about something," I asked her. "Well, the other day, when I went to see a movie with friends from school, I saw Dad with another woman," she said. I was shocked. "What?" Natalie continued. "They weren't holding hands or anything, but they seemed a bit close. Lately, I've noticed Dad talking a lot on the phone before you get home. Sometimes he's so focused on his phone that he doesn't really listen to me. He looks happy while on his phone. At first, I thought he was texting or talking to you, but after seeing him with that woman, I'm starting to wonder if he was talking to her instead." Natalie looked really sad as she spoke. She was already in middle school and sensitive to these kinds of issues, so I knew she wouldn't be able to handle this alone. I was also shocked. The thought that John, who I believed always put Natalie first, might be having an affair was heartbreaking. "I'm so sorry, sweetie. I didn't realize we were making you feel this way. I've been too focused on work, haven't I?" Natalie reassured me. "No, it's okay that you work hard, Mom. Don't feel bad about that." I was grateful for her understanding words. "Thank you, Natalie. I'll talk to your dad about this. If it turns out he's having an affair, I think I'll have to get a divorce." Is that okay with you? She nodded. I don't like the idea of Dad having an affair. Just knowing that and still being with him would make me feel bad. Seeing Natalie so upset made me realize how much I had neglected my family. I knew I needed to get to the bottom of this issue, especially since Natalie had the courage to bring it up. I hired a private investigator to look into John's possible affair. The results were shocking. John was indeed having an affair, just as Natalie said, and there was photographic evidence to prove it. What stunned me the most was who his affair partner was: Stacy, one of my high school classmates and a member of our mom's group. I was more surprised by this betrayal from a friend I trusted than by John's affair itself. Stacy, a stay-at-home mom and the last to marry in our group, had a young child of her own. Yet she was involved with John and neglecting her own child. When I saw the evidence, I was overwhelmed and couldn't move for a while. If I hadn't been alone in my room, Natalie might have stumbled upon those photos, causing even more turmoil in our family. I wasn't ready to confront John yet, and I definitely couldn't let Natalie see these pictures. I took a deep breath to calm myself down. Then, another friend from the mom's group told me she had changed jobs, which gave me the idea to suggest a get-together. I figured it would be a good chance to see Stacy without her knowing I was aware of the affair. The get-together was planned for 3 weeks later. During that time, I quickly hired a lawyer and began preparing for the divorce. I briefly informed Natalie about what I had discovered and that her dad and I would be getting a divorce. We spent our days off together looking for a new apartment. The day of the get-together finally arrived. I started by asking my friend about her new job, and then we all shared updates about our lives. Stacy still didn't seem to know that I was aware of her secret, and we had a normal conversation. Everyone's working, so it's good that things are changing, Stacy said. I'm just a housewife, so I'm stuck in the same routine. Well, you don't have to work, Stacy, because you have a husband who supports you, one of my friends replied. I do appreciate my husband, but sometimes I feel a little bored, Stacy admitted. It was time to confront her about the affair. So, is that why you're having an affair with other people's husbands? I asked. Stacy and the other friends froze at my comment. Aaron, what do you mean by that? Stacy asked, her face going pale. Well, it seems that Stacy is having an affair with my husband John, I said. What? No way. You must be joking, the other friend said, trying to defend Stacy. Since my friends were protecting her, Stacy took advantage of it. That's right, Aaron. What are you talking about all of a sudden? You must have confused me with someone else, Stacy said, trying to deflect. Oh really? I replied. Then why don't you all take a look at this? I pulled out the photos from my bag and laid them out on the table. My friends stared at the photos in shock. Oh my gosh, they gasped. Stacy, why? They asked. Stacy, clearly caught off guard by the evidence, covered her mouth with her hand. I'm so shocked. Why did you have an affair with my husband? Stacy seemed to realize there was no way out. I'm really sorry. I happened to walk into the cafe where your husband works. I didn't know he worked there at first, but I started going there regularly. My husband provides for me, but he's been neglecting me since we got married. I was feeling lonely. Stacy started to cry as she spoke, but even though she had her reasons, having an affair is unacceptable, especially with a friend's husband. I remained calm and composed, not letting her tears affect me. I'm sorry to everyone else, but I need to tell Stacy that I'm going to pursue alimony from her, I said. I also sent a certified letter about this to your mailbox today, Stacy. Your husband should have already seen it. Oh no, Stacy said, looking worried. How could he do something so terrible? She asked, still in shock. It's far worse to have an affair with a friend's husband when you're married and have a child of your own. You need to face the consequences and make amends for what you've done, I said. Stacy turned pale and nodded. One of my other friends added, We really can't trust you anymore, Stacy. We left the restaurant, leaving Stacy behind. Now that I had dealt with her, it was time to confront John. I was pretty sure Stacy had already contacted him about what happened. When I got home, John met me at the door, looking panicked. What have you done? I just got a call from Stacy. Are you really making our affair public? How could you be so terrible? You acted like a good husband, but you were cheating on me. No, that's not. But Stacy has a family too. How could you expose her like that? It's ridiculous. I responded, It seems people who have affairs think alike. You believe that as long as the other person doesn't find out, it's not a big deal. But what you did was wrong, and it all needs to be revealed as part of your punishment. That's why I'm going to divorce you and seek alimony and child support." With clear evidence of the affair, John couldn't deny what happened and agreed to the divorce. However, he was hesitant about paying alimony and child support. When I hired a strong lawyer and made it clear that I was ready to take the case to court, he finally agreed to pay. So I divorced my ex-husband, sold a house we had been living in, and moved into a new apartment with Natalie. I also pursued alimony from both John and Stacy and received $30,000 from each. Additionally, I secured child support from John. Once everything was settled, Natalie and I started our new life together. The experience was very traumatic for me, but over time, my wounds began to heal. However, about 6 months later, another issue arose. I was relaxing at home with Natalie on my day off when I got a surprising call from my mother. She told me that my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law had shown up at my parents' house and forced their way in without permission. My father was out, so my mother called me in a hurry. I quickly got ready and went to my parents' house. When I arrived, my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law were sitting on the living room sofa waiting for me. I had no idea why they were there. "What are you both doing here at my parents' house all of a sudden?" I asked. My ex-husband then shocked me with his next words. "I want you to give me back the money you owe me." "Huh? I never borrowed any money from you. I paid $15,000 for our wedding, remember? You were the one in charge of the wedding, so that money was lent to you. Now that we're divorced, you're claiming it was all a fraud. Honestly, I could sue you for marriage fraud, but for now, all I want is that $15,000 back as a settlement." He made an unreasonable request. My ex-mother-in-law also insisted that I pay him as soon as possible. After the divorce, I knew that John had taken a full-time job at the cafe where he used to work, but the pay there wasn't much. It seemed he was struggling financially, which might explain his unreasonable demands. "Well, let me remind you that we both were equally involved in the wedding, and I paid more of our living expenses than you did. So $15,000 is just a small part of what I contributed. Don't bother me with such unreasonable demands." I tried to get them to leave, but they didn't budge. Just then, my father came home. He had apparently received a call from my mother and rushed back. "What are you guys doing here?" my father demanded. My ex-husband explained the same thing to my father, clearly afraid of him. My father listened quietly but was clearly furious and shocked by John's unreasonable demands. "It's your fault for having an affair in the first place. If you're going to make such outrageous demands, get out of here," my father said. He tried to kick them out, but my ex-husband fell to his knees and begged, "Please, Aaron, lend me money. Not only are you demanding alimony, but Stacy's husband is also after me and I can't afford it. Even $10,000 would help." It was shocking to see him begging for money in such a situation. I told him coldly, "No, I can't do that. Go home." But my ex-mother-in-law insisted, "You're also responsible for what happened. You should lend him the money." The situation was escalating, so my father said, "Fine, I'll get the money. Just wait here," and went to another room. "Hey Dad, what are you doing?" I hurried after him, and my father grinned. "Well, I have plenty of money. Since we have it, why not give it to them?" he said, opening the closet and pulling out some cash. This should be interesting, I thought. My father put the bills in an envelope and handed it to John. Satisfied with the fake money, my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law left with pleased expressions. As soon as they were gone, I locked the door and called the police. The two must have realized the money was fake as soon as they stepped outside because they came rushing back, banging on our front door. "Hey, what's going on? This is Monopoly money. I don't want this fake cash," John shouted angrily. I laughed and responded through the door. "Since we have so much money, I thought I'd share it with you." John exclaimed, "You've got to be kidding," and started banging even harder on the door, kicking it with his feet. They didn't realize their actions were only making things worse for them. As John and his mother were kicking the door, the police arrived and caught them in the act. Neighbors gathered around, and many witnessed John and his mother getting arrested. In the end, John didn't get any money but was fined for the arrest and had to pay for the damage to our front door. Additionally, one of the people who saw the arrest was a regular at the cafe where John worked, and news spread quickly. As a result, John was fired from his job. Now, John is struggling to find work and has moved back in with his parents. His in-laws are covering his alimony and child support payments for him. I've also filed a restraining order against my former in-laws. If anything happens, my family can call the police, and they will respond immediately. Now I'm happier than ever with Natalie. I'm committed to working hard and enjoying watching my daughter grow up. Thank you for watching until the end. Please subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.
"Take care of this, slave," John chuckled smugly, further insulting me as he tossed his dress suit my way. The suit struck me, causing water to spill. "Ah, wipe it up, will you, and bring me another glass of water." Drunk as he was, or perhaps because of it, John's true feelings became apparent. In his eyes, I was nothing more than a slave. I threw the dress suit into the laundry bag with all my might, only to notice something sticking out of the suit pocket. Unfolding the crinkly, tightly folded paper, he had instructed me to take care of it, and so I intended to do just that. Beyond wondering why such a thing existed, I felt as if this was my ticket to freedom, an escape from all the irritation and dissatisfaction I experienced with John. I rushed out of the house and promptly submitted the divorce notice to the office. My name is Vanessa Owen, currently 50 years old with 2 children, Nicole, my firstborn, followed by my son Matt. From the beginning of my relationship with John, I never got along with his parents. Despite their disapproval, I loved John and believed we could be happy together. We eloped, defying my parents' objections, and started living in a small apartment. However, John was perpetually unhappy about our elopement-style marriage, nagging about leaving my parents for this marriage. There was a good reason for our rushed marriage. Nicole was already on her way. Despite John's knowledge of this, my parents opposed the marriage mainly because John never formally introduced himself. However, I don't intend to blame John entirely, acknowledging my faults. I've never liked his parents, who constantly criticized me. Right now, with a child on the way, we should focus on the future rather than dwelling on the past. Despite my admonishments, John continued berating me, saying things like I should never have married you, or your cooking is worse compared to my mother's. With no place to return after our elopement, I endured John's nagging every day. Despite everything, John adored our children, and our kids, Nicole and Matt, kept our marriage together through high school. When Jan was promoted to department head and brought colleagues home, including a male subordinate named Rob and a female subordinate named Jenna Manning, our marital relationship deteriorated. Though John had a good reputation outside the house and was highly trusted by colleagues, our family barely functioned. At one gathering, John's words revealed his true feelings, saying he could divorce me anytime, but I wouldn't let him go. This admission, disguised as a joke, made me realize the depth of his dissatisfaction. Despite his words, John's subordinates praised our supposed good relationship, while John laughed, intoxicated, insulting, and bragging until he passed out. His subordinates helped with the cleanup. As we cleaned up in a friendly atmosphere, Jenna spoke up, revealing that the director actually praised me at work. Unbelievable! I laughed, and Jenna chimed in, "It's true. He always says his family gets along well. The president admires that too. The president values family in that regard. The director is always praising his family, so the president tells everyone else to learn from him. That kind of joke earlier only works if there's a good relationship, right?" Gina, seeming a bit tipsy, happily chatted away about John's behavior at work. "If that's true, that's good," I repeated, forcing a smile. I muttered under my breath, trust was long gone between us. I quickly realized that John was just saying those things to make himself look good. I've heard that good liars mix a bit of truth in their lies. Jan was probably deceiving his colleagues in the same way. I didn't know if it was his nature or a calculated move. But this made me truly despise Jan. I disliked how he shamelessly used the family as a facade. However, our children were still students, and I wanted them to go to college. As John said, think of the children. I couldn't divorce him. However, Jan had never brought up divorce either. We were just living life without making waves. In this life, our children grew up honest and cheerful. Nickel graduated from a local university and joined a nearby company. 3 years later, Matt, who had left home for university, also found a job locally and decided to return home. I was genuinely happy that the children were coming back, and when both became working adults, it felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. Then another happy event occurred. Mom, I'm thinking of getting married, Nicole, in her 3rd year of working, told me. Her partner was a senior at her company, Chris Adams, a fine young man who had spent his childhood overseas. He seemed very intelligent. John was happy about the marriage too, and Nicole quickly started preparing for it. The wedding was to be a casual garden wedding. Usually, I'd wear a formal dress, and Jan would wear a morning suit. Still, guests were told to dress casually, so it was decided that I would wear a simple dress, and John would be fine in his existing suit. Despite everything, I wanted to honor Nicole's special day, so I carefully chose a dress. I thought about getting a new suit for Jan, but he insisted that the one he already had was fine. Reluctantly, I brushed and mended John's suit, looking forward to the wedding. On the wedding day, blessed with good weather, the ceremony began, surrounded by beautiful greenery and flowers. Rob and Gina, John's colleagues who had always been kind to Nicole and Matt, attended the wedding, and I thanked them for coming. At the reception, a stand-up party, I spent a happy time greeting Nicole's friends and colleagues. Jan seemed to be enjoying himself, but perhaps getting too drunk, he started commanding, "Hey, Vanessa, get me a drink." Waiters were walking around the venue, and it was embarrassing that he had to call out to me, who was far away, instead of just looking around. "Mrs. Owen, I'll go for you." Rob and Gina supported me, entertaining John, especially Gina, who stayed by John's side like a wife. I felt uneasy about it but was busy greeting other guests, so I left John to them. It was a beautiful ceremony, and the wedding ended successfully. Gina took care of a heavily drunk Jan until the end when the taxi arrived. She said, "John, your taxi is here," and helped him into the car. I also got into the taxi and spoke to her. "Thank you, Gina. Take care." "No, thank you. Looks like it's going to be a long night. Take care." I took her words as a reference to the drunk John and laughed. However, her gaze was not on John but me. I felt strange again, but I said goodbye and returned home with Jan. Nicole and Matt went to the after-party. Leaving just the two of us in the taxi, Jan seemed a bit more cheerful after a nap. When we got home, he walked in on his own. Usually, we didn't talk much, but Jan, more drunk than usual, couldn't stop talking. Finally, the kids are off our hands. I was worried about Nichols turning out like you, but I'm glad she got married. He belittled me as usual. John lay on the sofa. Vanessa, water, and then he arrogantly ordered me around. I sighed inwardly and went to get in water. "Here's your water. Take off the suit if you're going to sleep. It'll get wrinkled." I said that and put the water on the table. John, getting up, said as he undressed, "You're really useful. You do everything. I can't believe you'd speak that way, even if you're drunk. Hey, slave, take care of this." John chuckled smugly, throwing his dress suit at me. The suit hit me, causing water to spill. "Ah, wipe it up, will you, and bring me another glass of water." Whether drunk or not, it must be his true feelings. John thought of me as a slave. I was initially angry, but the anger didn't last long. Seeing Jian snoring loudly in front of me, I surprisingly felt nothing. I realized that I had become indifferent to Jian, lacking even hatred or love. After picking up the suit that John had carelessly thrown aside, I noticed his trousers had also been discarded. Feeling irritated again, I stood before the bag for dry cleaning, angrily throwing the suit into the bag with all my strength. That's when I noticed something sticking out of the suit's pocket. "What?" I muttered to myself, surprised, and pulled it out. It was a piece of paper, crisply folded. As I unfolded it, I had to cover my mouth in shock. At that moment, I remembered Gina's words about the night being long, so that's what she meant. Realizing this, a smile involuntarily formed on my lips. He said to take care of it, so I should, right? I could hear the excitement in my voice. The piece of paper in front of me, which had come out of John's suit pocket, was a divorce notice already filled out by Jan. Yeah, that must be it. He meant for me to submit it, so I will. More than wondering why it was there, I felt like it was my ticket to freedom. It seemed like an escape from all my irritation and dissatisfaction with John. It was still 8:00 p.m., and the dry cleaners were still open. I grabbed the dry cleaning and the divorce notice, rushing out of the house. After dropping off the suit at the cleaners, I headed straight to the government office. Please take this. I went to the 24-hour service desk and, with a smile, handed over the hastily completed divorce notice. Then I hurriedly packed my things, taking only what I needed. I left the house with John still snoring loudly. For the time being, I decided to stay at a hotel, soaking in a large bath and sleeping in a comfortable bed until morning. However, the next morning, my phone had several missed calls, all from John. It surprised me that my number was still in John's phone. Yes, where are you? Just as I was thinking about it, another call came in. Reluctantly, I answered, and John's panicked voice came through. He must have been surprised to wake up and find me gone. After all, the spilled water is still there, a clear sign of something amiss. Where are you? Just as I was about to respond, John continued, We came home together, didn't we? The water is still spilled, and your clothes are gone. What's going on? From his words, it was clear he didn't remember what he had said the previous day. I sighed and said, You told me to send the suit to the cleaners, right? Well, there was a completed divorce notice in it. I thought that meant I should submit it, so I did. John erupted on the other end of the phone, yelling, What? How dare you do something so reckless? Do you realize what you've done? I was surprised by his reaction, but no matter how angry John got on the phone, it didn't bother me. You're so loud this early in the morning. I'm about to have breakfast at the buffet. Bye. Probably there was nothing to eat at home since I'd always prepared breakfast every morning. There was neither bread nor cereal stocked up. Nickel was likely at the hotel given as a wedding gift, and Matt wouldn't wake up until afternoon, having probably stayed out late drinking. John must be panicking alone in a house without food. With that thought, I savored my delicious breakfast. After breakfast, I immediately went to look for an apartment at a real estate agency. I didn't have the luxury of choice. I urgently needed to find a new place to live, but thankfully, I stumbled upon an apartment just a few blocks down from Nickel's new place. Moreover, the real estate agency was hiring part-time staff. I found both a home and a job that day and felt immensely grateful to the company. On my way back to the hotel, I received a call from Matt. Mom, where are you? Dad's making a fuss. I had been ignoring calls from John, so he must have forced Matt to call me. Matt's voice still sounded sleepy. I've divorced your father. I'm leaving the house, so take care. What? What do you mean? Matt sounded surprised by my words. Anyway, I needed to explain everything properly to my children. I decided to call Nickel that day and explain everything at the house. Why'd you suddenly call me here? Nickel looked anxious, understandably so. Yesterday was the peak of happiness, but today she was called to the house for something serious. She must have known it wasn't just a casual conversation. I felt sorry for her, but my parenting days were over. Being a parent is forever, but I want to live as a person, not as anyone's slave. I shouldn't feel ashamed for this. Even though I thought this, I couldn't shake off the guilt towards my children. A sudden divorce? What do you mean divorce? Both of them questioned me simultaneously, and even John, taking advantage of the situation, joined in. That can't be true, right? Convince her. Despite being the root cause of the issue, John played the victim. It was turning into a 3-against-1 situation. I wanted the children to understand that this divorce wasn't just my whim. All I did was submit the divorce papers that your father had already filled out. Why am I being treated like the villain when it was your father who had prepared them in the first place?" Hearing this, Nicole and Matt turned their gazes to John. Caught off guard, John frantically searched for an excuse. A villain? Come on, that was just a joke, right? Who would actually submit that? A joke? Do you have any idea how much that joke has worn me down? Jen flinched at my loud voice. Nicole and Matt clammed up, exchanging looks. Besides, for a joke, it was too well prepared, don't you think? To me, it looked like something prepared to convince someone. John turned red and argued back, spitting out his words. His panicked state made the children realize something was amiss. I couldn't help but burst into laughter at John's behavior. No need to get so worked up. It's like you're admitting it's true. You set me up. You're the one who got angry at my deduction. Listening to our conversation, Nicole cautiously asked a question. What do you mean? I decided it was time to tell them everything. Well, you're not children anymore, so I have to tell you. Your father and Gina are having an affair. What are you talking about? John turned pale and stood up. Nicole and Matt looked shocked at first, but then directed looks of contempt at John. I found it strange. She used to call him director, but recently it's been John, and her words about our happy family felt insincere. That can't be. While she said she'd invite us, it felt like she was mocking us. A woman's intuition is often right. John was sweating unnaturally, unable to make any excuses. His behavior only confirmed my suspicions. While it was a shock, it was more about betrayal than lost love, which allowed me to keep my composure. But what really kept me sane was my role as a mother. To think she was invited to the wedding. "I'm sorry, Mom," Nicole started crying. Jan looked hurt by her words, but he had no right to feel hurt, and Nicole shouldn't feel responsible. "I only became sure of it yesterday. It's not your fault, Nicole," I comforted Nicole. As I said this, Matt sighed deeply, giving John a sharp look. I knew Mom and Dad weren't close, but this is too much. John's voice trembled pitifully. I had no choice. She kept pressuring me for a divorce, and I had to invite her to Nicole's wedding to convince her. "Even the divorce papers, you used me. Otherwise," she said, she'd tell the president about the affair. Anger made my fists tremble. After our force, she wanted to become John's next wife and take my place as Nicole's mother. So she had to attend the wedding. That's why he reluctantly invited her, planning to initiate the divorce afterward, showing her the completed divorce notice as proof. "I never intended to really divorce you, it's true." "Sure, you never intended to let go of your slave, did you?" "What are you saying? I never thought of you that way," John desperately pleaded, but Matt interjected. "But Dad, you always said it would be easy to marry a woman who obeyed everything like Mom does." "What? You always belittled Mom but never divorced her because you thought it was convenient for you." I stood up. "Is there any reason I should stay married to this man?" Nicole and Matt shook their heads firmly. "Mom, you deserve to be free." "That's right. And you'll always be our mom, even if Dad becomes a stranger." Nicole wiped her tears and smiled through her sniffles. After that, we left the house. Matt, not wanting to stay with John, decided to move into my apartment. The divorce papers were already submitted. We still had to sort out the property division, but I was relieved to distance myself from John. A month later, one of John's subordinates, Rob, visited the real estate agency. "When I started working here, huh? Aren't you Director Owen's wife, Rob? Thank you for coming to Nicole's wedding the other day. What brings you here today?" "Actually, I broke up with my girlfriend and thought about a fresh start. Maybe moving to a new house." Rob smiled awkwardly as he sat down in front of me. "Oh, I see." I had heard about Rob's girlfriend a few times. He seemed to care for her deeply, but it must not have worked out. Wanting to cheer him up, I responded with a smile. "We found a suitable place, but since it was lunchtime and the person in charge of viewings was out, we scheduled a viewing for another day. By the way, when did you start working here?" Director didn't mention anything about it. "No, really, we got divorced." "What? But last week at the dinner with the president, John was talking about planning a family trip. Rob was shocked, and so was I. John was still spreading such nonsense. He would undoubtedly continue using the family to get closer to the president if I stayed silent. I decided to tell Rob the whole story. John and Gina. That's unbelievable. Rob turned pale. His reaction was oddly striking. He slowly opened his mouth. My girlfriend was Gina Manning. I gasped, not expecting that Rob and Gina had been dating. Rob muttered, I can't forgive them. I silently watched him. Mrs. Owen, I can't forgive the two of them. I'll inform the president. His determined gaze met my nod of agreement. I felt the same way. I refused to be manipulated by John any longer. Rob left the shop, saying he'd come back for the viewing another time. He had my contact information from Nicole's wedding. I was sure he would contact me eventually. That day after work, as I was heading home, Rob contacted me immediately. Mrs. Owen, I told the president. His voice was much more energetic than the time we met, made me smile. The president was furious, betraying his family and having an affair with a subordinate. Both of them will be dealt with. Really? That's great. Now we won't be used by them anymore. Those two deceived everyone, the family, the staff, even the president. They were called into the president's office right after I left. Imagining the scene, I couldn't help but smile. Even though they were no longer a part of my life, I couldn't accept them getting away scot-free. Thank you, Rob. You will surely find happiness. I sent this to Rob, feeling like it was something I also wanted to hear. Eventually, Jan and Gina's affairs spread throughout the company, especially John, who had always boasted about his happy family life, turned out to be a scoundrel who preyed on a subordinate. He was demoted 3 ranks from director to an ordinary employee. At home, he had no family waiting for him. For a man over 50, it would be interesting to see how he would live from now on. Gina resigned, probably due to the scrutiny. She was about 35 years old, a pitiful woman unemployed in her mid-30s after meddling with a married man. Their relationship also ended. Such an unhealthy affair was never going to last. Gina had pleaded with Rob, but he firmly rejected her. Feeling relieved, his reaction made me feel relieved too. Afterward, I continued to live peacefully with Matt in our apartment. 2 years later, Matt told me he was getting married. Just when I thought I'd be alone, he said, Mom, let's live together now. I'm looking forward to the birth of my grandchild. Living with Matt and his wife, Nicole, is also doing well as a mother of one. The fact our family keeps growing brings me joy. I reached out to my elderly parents whom I hadn't spoken to in a while, told them about the divorce. They said, bring the kids over sometime. And I felt endlessly sorry and grateful to them. I plan to make up for my past mistakes by being filial to my parents and continue to be a reliable mother, always there to help my children.